Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. I evolve infinitely in the Marvel world. Chapter 121. Lacey's words made Renly, Kyle, and the Predictor all gleam in their eyes. I only considered the difference between personal strength and the strength of the steel armor, but did not consider that the weapons carried by this steel army would have the final say in some large-scale wars. This made Renly, Kyle, and the Predictor immediately respect Tony. It is inevitable that a mind like Tony will develop a lot of high technology in the future. Not only can it bring a steady stream of funds to the Void Cult, but it can also build various facilities. And Tony's technology will inevitably become a trump card of the Void God religion in the future. They can play a role in facing various battles, but when facing some large-scale wars, unless a person's strength directly exceeds the limit, the impact will be limited. At that time, it was time for technology to come on the scene and directly cover it with firepower. Considering that Tony's own strength is not strong yet, and he lacks combat experience, depending on the situation, they have to protect Tony to prevent Tony's trump card from encountering mishaps. When several people are talking, Tony has installed gravity devices on 16 space fighters, allowing them to begin test flights to test their performance. And in the process, Tony obtained a lot of useful information, which made Tony very happy. A bunch of people around him admired Tony even more, because they saw a possibility. If Tony could get a set for the new members of the Void God Cult, it could perfectly help the new members of the Void God Cult to get through the weak period at the beginning. It may not be possible now, but as the prophets say, it will be possible later. People who came on behalf of 16 large companies, after testing the performance, all signed orders worth $100 million with Tony. I plan to try it on a small scale first. If I use it for a year without any problems, I will continue to place orders in the future. And they also asked about the steel armor. Although they were a little disappointed when they learned that it would not be sold, it was expected. Tony Stark must have a very good mind to be able to produce such a high-tech mechanical armor. There will also be opportunities for them to work together in the future to purchase other technologies produced by Tony Stark. After they each paid a deposit of $50 million to Tony Stark, they left first. This time he got back $800 million, but Tony knew that he hadn't really earned the $800 million yet. Miss Sonia, tonight I will ask Jarvis to pass you the design drawings of the factory and the equipment that needs to be purchased. After the factory is built, I'll ask you to help recruit some people and start construction. So Tony transferred $798,500,000 to Sonia and left $5 million for himself to spend. Then he spoke. Okay, I will use this money to the maximum extent possible. Construction can start in a month at most. Sonia nodded upon hearing this and gave a more specific time. I feel relieved to leave it to you. Then you go get busy first. Tony smiled and nodded. Afterwards, Tony flew into the sky and quickly headed to his laboratory. He had just scanned a large amount of information on space fighters, allowing him to start learning in advance how to construct his own space fighter. Sonia saw Mr. Tony Stark leaving, glanced at the members of the Void Cult who were still watching, and left too. She wanted to report the good news to Mr. Cassadine, and she didn't care that Mr. Tony Stark left $5 million for herself. Mr. Tony Stark had no choice before and couldn't make money, so he always had to apply for funds to do whatever he wanted to do. Although no matter what you apply for, Mr. Cassadine will basically agree. But when you want to use money, you must apply. This is definitely no secret for Mr. Tony Stark. Now that we have finally come to $800 million, it is normal to leave $5 million for the time being. $800 million. That's $800 million earned. Is this money really so easy to make? If you put $800 million in front of you, how high can it be piled up? How do I know? I haven't even seen $100 million. The other members of the Void Cult heard clearly the conversation between Tony Stark and those people. Now that Tony Stark and Miss Sonia had left, they all started talking immediately. Sure enough, if you want to make big money, you have to start a business. A large part of the reason why Tony Stark was able to succeed in starting a business so quickly is because Tony Stark has a good mind. So Lord Cassadine is willing to provide funds for him to study. How good is your mind? Starting a business requires ability. No, that's fine then. Some people from the Void Cult were extremely envious and dispersed while chatting. Although they did not hear it with their own ears, they saw that Lord Cassidyne's housekeeper, Miss Sonia, would occasionally come out to talk to Tony Stark. They also appeared together this time. Obviously, those who were willing to come over to investigate are probably Miss Sonia who helped find them. Therefore, it is not difficult for them to see that Lord Cassidyne supported Tony Stark's research and development of gravity devices in this transaction. However, Tony Stark does not use his physical strength. His technology alone is so powerful that it inspired the fighting spirit of some members of the Void cult. If you don't have such a good mind, then try to evolve yourself more. On the other hand, Sonia returned to the villa and reported the transaction process to Harvey. After the factory production is completed, how long will it take to get the first batch of orders? After hearing this, Harvey spoke. With these 795 million, we need to buy a small island. Then building the factory and training workers to operate the instruments can be done simultaneously. According to Mr. Tony Stark's instructions, the first batch of orders is expected to be completed in 4 months. The other party will then pay the full amount. As long as Mr. Tony Stark's name is publicized, there should be more orders in the future, so we need to increase the number of factories. According to estimates, after 1 year at most, after deducting taxes and dividends from Mr. Tony Stark, there will be at least 3 billion in revenue every year. This is still a conservative estimate. After hearing this, Sonia also told the time when the official profit-making will start, as well as the follow-up matters that require additional investment. High technology is a hugely profitable industry, especially Mr. Tony Stark's research on common devices suitable for various space fighters and space battleships. However, it is not something that ordinary people can do if they want to participate in the high-tech industry. Don't you think Tony Stark is such a genius? It only took 5 months to develop, but the development funds spent more than 800 million to purchase various equipment and materials. If it were to hire an elite team for development, it would cost even more money. But now Mr. Tony Stark has succeeded. As long as Mr. Tony Stark updates and iterates from time to time, the gravity device can maintain a high performance and low-cost core. In this interstellar age, there is no need to worry about not having a buyer for hundreds of years. A few hundred years later, even if a certain planet suddenly produces a space navigation vehicle that spans the ages, the space battleships of the old era will not be phased out so quickly for the time being. After all, the universe is so big. Not every civilization can completely eliminate the space battleships of the old era in the first time. Yes, then you can go and rest after preparing dinner for me. You have to prepare these matters starting tomorrow. Harvey was a little surprised when he heard Sonia say that starting from next year, he and Tony Stark will earn at least 3 billion a year. Sonia nodded slightly when she heard this, and sent a message to the kitchen, asking them to start cooking, and she would go and get it later. Immediately, Sonia sat down on a soft sofa in the hall and began to look up information. She wanted to investigate who owned the islands near Void Island. All the samples presented by Mr. Tony Stark today were produced by Mr. Tony Stark alone. But if you want to produce on a large scale, you need to build many factories. Void Island is the scope of future activities of the members of the Void cult. Naturally, it is impossible to set up a factory on Void Island. So the best thing is to buy another island and then carry out a series of developments on that island. Allowing hired workers to have somewhere to spend money can not only retain those workers, but also allow a small part of the capital to flow back. And through the words of the elite officers of the new army, Sonia finally understood. Even if she didn't mention Mr. Cassidyne, all the big shots on Xandar planet now basically know that she is Mr. Cassidyne's person. Although this is not Sonia's own wish, she wants to use her own ability to do various things well. But it was not her own will, but she would not deny that she was indeed protected by Mr. Cassidyne. But after having this understanding, Sonia understood that she could do it directly without Mr. Cassidyne's intervention when communicating about the purchase of the island. She also knew that as Mr. Cassidyne's housekeeper in the eyes of countless people outside, she needed to pay more attention to her behavior and not harm Mr. Cassidyne's face. It was not difficult at all to find out who owned an island, so Sonia quickly targeted several nearby islands. Immediately, Sonia sat up, pressed a floating table and floated directly in front of Sonia. She began to write down a plan for her itinerary for the next month, as well as a rough budget for the funds. It's easy to make mistakes when remembering so many things in your head, so Sonia's favorite thing is to take notes and read them every day to avoid forgetting something. When Harvey saw Sonia writing and drawing seriously, he felt a little emotional that his vision was indeed right. Sonia was a really reliable housekeeper. Because Sonia is a master of tasks, she will reflect on her shortcomings after finishing some things. If you find a shortcoming, you will go crazy to learn all kinds of knowledge, and strive to do it more perfectly next time. So in just over a year, he became accustomed to being served by Sonia and became lazier and lazier. Moreover, Sonia joined Void and would serve him for many years to come. Although he did not treat Sonia badly in terms of money, in addition to the initially negotiated salary, he would give Sonia some rewards and a lot of money from time to time. It was normal for Sonia to serve him, but Harvey found that he was getting lazier and lazier, which didn't seem to be a good thing. Think about how aggressive he was at the beginning. He had clear plans for everything, and he did many things by himself. As a result, after recruiting Sonia as his housekeeper, he didn't need to do many things. He just had to ask Sonia to do it. Thinking of this, Harvey felt that the next time he returned to Blue Star, he must find some original intention for himself. As for the time to go back, it will naturally be 7 months later, in 2011. It just so happened that Tony was going back to Blue Star. By that time, Blue Star would usher in the first cosmic invasion, and many interesting things would happen. What if he didn't go and see what happened? Depending on the opportunity, the Hulk can be pulled into the void. At that time, Dr. Banner and Tony will join forces to develop technology faster. After deciding that he would do it next time, Harvey continued to be a salty fish. Sonia also felt that Mr. Cassadine glanced at her just now, and then looked back and found that Mr. Cassadine was playing the game leisurely and didn't care anymore. She wouldn't care if Mr. Cassadine slept every day, as long as she took care of all the instructions. Although the scope of what she has to do now has become much wider and she has to learn all kinds of knowledge, she still enjoys it. Now, just the money Mr. Cassadine gives her from time to time has given her more than 12 million in savings. You must know that she has been working for Mr. Cassadine in less than a year, and she has earned the same amount of money she had earned working in a celebrity hotel for decades. Moreover, Mr. Cassadine usually had no instructions and gave her enough freedom, so she was still very happy during this period. The problem is that she needs to stay on the island most of the time, so she doesn't have much time to go out and spend money. Many of the clothes that are directly delivered to your door cannot be worn out to meet members of the Void cult, lest they damage Mr. Cassadine's majesty. But Sonia is not in a hurry. After joining the Void, she has more time, and she will always have the opportunity to go out and spend it in the future. Then dinner was prepared, and after Sonia went to help get it, she thought about the things she had to do in a month in detail, and then she finished writing. The time has also reached 10 o'clock in the evening. Sonia stood up and stretched, making a seductive voice. Her figure wrapped in a short dress showed her perfect curves and astonishing whiteness. If other men saw this scene, their blood would surge, but Harvey's eyes were fixed on the game console in front of him the whole time, without even turning his head. Sonia looked at Mr. Cassadine, who didn't look back, with some resentment flashing in his eyes. She thought her appearance was not bad, otherwise it would not have been possible for her to have passed all the appearance tests in a matter of seconds during the 10-year review at a celebrity hotel. After joining the Void, she looked several years younger, her skin became whiter, smoother, and more attractive. As a result, Mr. Cassadine never thought of getting close to a beautiful woman like herself. Mr. Cassadine, I have to leave the island tomorrow to do some things. So I'll have the chef deliver your meal to your door on time. You will need to go downstairs to get it in person. But soon Sonia covered up the resentment in her eyes and warned with some worry. She had seen this side of Mr. Cassadine before she joined the Void and believed in the Void cult. If others find out that Mr. Cassadine, who is admired by many members of Void Island, often looks lazy at home, it would be detrimental to his dignity. So it is obviously impossible for others to deliver food directly. I know, just go and do it. After hearing this, Harvey looked back at Sonia and nodded. When Sonia saw Cassadine agreed, she knew that it would be useless to talk too much, so she went to find something to eat. In the next month, Sonia had to greet visitors and discuss various matters outside. So basically I have to run around the island and outside every day. Fortunately, after a few days, Harvey asked Sonia to buy a space fighter plane, otherwise he would waste a lot of time running back and forth. Of course, this space fighter is not only for Sonia to travel. It can be thrown to Tony for research when it is not used. Originally, Harvey planned to buy a large space battleship directly, but was persuaded by Sonia. Not only did Sonia think it was too wasteful, but it was also inconvenient to use such a large space battleship for her own travel. Even if the space battleship is purchased, Mr. Tony does not have enough funds for research and development. Therefore, it is best to proceed in a circular manner and let Mr. Tony start researching the space fighter first. When Mr. Tony has thoroughly researched the space fighter and started making profits from its production, he will definitely have accumulated a lot of technology and knowledge, and he will naturally have funds for research and development. A month later, Sonia spent $370 million to buy a small island with an area of only 200 square kilometers, located 50 nautical miles away from Void Island. We also built a factory, purchased facilities, and trained a group of technicians to work together to make the fine accessories needed for gravity devices. After the final production and assembly, it will be sent to Tony's laboratory on the Void Island. After Jarvis inputs some programs, a gravity device will be completed. An order of 800 million requires the production of 800 gravity devices. Generally speaking, the purchase cost of a gravity device suitable for small and medium-sized space battleships is at least 5 million. Tony Stark only made 1 million copies, and he cut off 4 million. Normally, this is indeed a loss, but the production cost is only more than 300,000 yuan, and including labor, it is only 420,000 yuan. And as Tony Stark, who has just joined the arms industry, he wants to bite some meat from the mouths of various leaders in the arms industry. From the beginning, we must take the path of higher performance and cheaper price. Once we start to become famous, the selling price of the technology produced by Tony can be raised. Knowing that things are on the right track, he will have enough money to buy a space fighter in a few months at most. So Tony also decided to relax for himself. It is June 2010, which is the hot summer season on Xandar. Many people gathered on the beach of Void Island, most of them were men, with only 3 women among them. There have never been many women who dared to come to Void Island and insisted on their faith to be blessed. However, these 3 were also a little bit popular among the thousands of grasses. They showed off their hot figures in bikinis, which dazzled all the men around them. When Tony came to the beach, he suddenly heard a boom, a loud noise like thunder. A ball-shaped object flew toward him like a cannonball. Tony's eyes narrowed, and he stretched out his palms forward. With a sound of bang, when the ball-shaped object fell into Tony's hand, it kept spinning and rubbing, causing smoke. The burst of force caused Tony's feet to slide back 2 meters, leaving an obvious ravine on the beach. Tony's hand was a little painful from the heat of friction, but he didn't care because the pain was disappearing very quickly. Tony took a closer look at his hand and saw that it was a volleyball. "Tony, it's rare for you to come here and have some fun." At this time, a voice came from the side and issued an invitation. Tony heard the sound and looked around to find that it was Renly, who invited him to spar. "It doesn't seem fair to compare me to you." After hearing this, Tony turned the volleyball in his hand, walked over, and said with a smile, "It's just for fun. Of course, you can't use your real skills. You need to control your own strength to play. Otherwise, who would dare to play with that guy Kyle?" Renly pointed his thumb back after hearing this and said. When Tony heard these words, he looked over and saw Kyle, who was as tall as a mountain, leaping more than 10 meters high in a 30-meter beach volleyball court. The thick arms suddenly clapped, and with a boom, the muffled thunder sounded again. This kind of sound can make people feel an amazing sense of power, but the volleyball that was slapped did not break. It was like an exploding meteor falling directly to the opposite side. Kyle's opponent is Lacey, who is wearing a black bikini and showing off her hot figure. At this time, Lacey's eyes were full of sharpness, and her body appeared at the landing point as soon as she moved. There was some impact on the beach under her feet, and the sand splashed, and she caught the volleyball. After the volleyball bounced, Lacey stared at the ground with both feet, jumped up high, and with a sudden bang sound, the volleyball flew past at high speed like a bullet coming out of the barrel. Kyle had just landed on the ground, like a running giant bear. Every time he stepped on the ground, he made a real low roar. He quickly caught it and slapped it again. Lacey and Kyle were playing volleyball, and they were playing fiercely, but the volleyball just wouldn't explode. It can be seen that the two of them control their power very exquisitely. Okay, what are the rules? After hearing this, Tony turned the volleyball in his hands, came to the opposite side of Renly's volleyball court, and said, 1 point will be deducted if you can't catch it, 1 point will be deducted if it goes out of bounds, 1 point will be deducted if the ball explodes, whoever loses gets a treat. Renly saw some interest in Tony's eyes and explained the rules. Because the physical fitness of the members of the Void God cult has exceeded that of ordinary people. Therefore, even if they play common sports in the world of ordinary people, they will play extremely intensely. However, various sports are also the most popular events among the members of Void Island. Because not only is there a chance of winning, but you can also exercise your control over power, and the most important thing is that if you win, it will prove that you have better control over power. The desire to win makes no one want to lose, so every time various competitive sports are held, everyone's interest is extremely high. Now that it's summer, you can see beauties, play in the water, and enjoy the summer beach, so more people have gathered, and there's even an opening for everyone to place bets on who will win. Of course the stakes are not big, just a few guests. Now everyone in the Void God sect is a foodie, so how could they be willing to gamble so much that they would have no money to eat for a period of time in the future? It was my first time playing and I needed to test the hardness of the ball. When Tony heard these rules and saw the lively atmosphere around him, he felt motivated to fight. I wonder which man doesn't want to show his absolute style in the same competition and receive cheers and applause. You can do whatever you want. You can serve first later. Renly heard this and said with an indifferent expression. Tony heard that he could try whatever he wanted, and he also knew that it would not be a wise choice for him to choose Renly just after playing. Because the others were fighting and only Renly was resting, it was obvious that Renly should have won a lot of people. But even if he knew he would lose, Tony didn't care. It was just money for a meal, and the most important thing was to have fun. But when it comes to deciding the winner, Tony won't give in easily. In the 6 months since he came to Xandar, he has evolved twice a week on average, and now he has evolved 124 times. He doesn't know how far his own strength has reached. He had just arrived on Xandar and needed to find a way to make money, so he focused on research. There is no time to find strong enemies or equal opponents to let him know his own strength. Now that making money is gradually getting on the right track, he rarely goes out for a walk. Knowing that there is such a competition, he has to test his own strength, which is a pity for himself. So Tony threw the ball, jumped up high, and shot it with 3 points of strength. With a sound of bang, the volleyball quickly flew over the net and hit the back of Renly accurately. Renly disappeared in an instant, caught the ball, and then leapt high and slapped it hard. The volleyball broke out with a more violent attack, carrying huge force and pouring water down. When Tony caught it, he felt the impact and fell back 3 meters. Fortunately, Renly's attacking position was him, and he was standing in the center of the field, more than 7 meters away from the boundary. If Renly's ball had hit the edge of the boundary, it would have been enough for him to catch the ball and make him go out of bounds and lose the point. This made Tony look at Lacey and Kyle, who were fighting fiercely behind them. Those 2 guys were probably used to it. You can just jack up and serve, but I'm going to give you some advice. If you want to win, the speed from receiving to serving must be fast, the serve must be hard, and the power must be strong. Being able to accurately control your own strength is the key to victory. Just having brute force does not mean you can win. Kyle had a hard time with it initially and bought a lot of meals. Renly saw Tony's watch bridge and knew what Tony was thinking, so he explained. Can I use tools? Tony said thoughtfully after hearing these words. Although I really want to give it a try with you. But this itself is a kind of competitive event for entertainment. Since it is a kind of competition, it is natural to pay attention to some competitive fairness. If you use auxiliary tools or superpowers, you will put the cart before the horse. But there will be other competition projects in the future, and I can give it a try with you. Renly shook his head when he heard this, and said with a smile. At the end of the sentence, his eyes showed fighting spirit. After seeing the stronger performance of Tony's steel armor last time, he actually wanted to compete with Tony. In this way, you can have a hearty battle, compare your strengths and weaknesses, and also increase your combat experience when facing such high-tech opponents, but unfortunately it is not possible yet. Tony nodded after hearing this, and tried a few more times, and found that after reaching 45% of the strength, the volleyball would explode. You can't use the power outside the field, so it should be okay to use some of your own power, right? After Tony had a general understanding, when he took the ball thrown by Renly again, he spoke. Tony, I remember you are not a superpower. What power do you have besides that armor? You might as well show it and give it a try. Renly did not deny it immediately after hearing this, but said with interest. Okay, then let me try again. After hearing this, Tony held the volleyball in his right hand and purple void energy appeared. He had seen Harvey's spatial teleportation ability, and Harvey said it was a type of void magic. So Tony is also trying his best to get some void energy, although he still has no idea about void magic. However, multiple evolutions have allowed him to possess more void energy. So Tony blessed the volleyball. Wrapped in purple energy, the volleyball seemed like a magic ball burning with purple flames. Under the purple light, it instantly attracted many onlookers. Where does your strength come from? Renly's eyes flickered when he saw the changes in the volleyball in Tony's hands. Evolution originating from the void. I just used the power from the void, so it shouldn't be a violation, right? Tony heard this and spoke. No, it's more interesting this way. It seems that the quality of the volleyball has become stronger and it seems that it can withstand more force. Renaud said eagerly when he heard originating from the void. The void divine cult basically focuses on strengthening one's physical body and strengthening one's 5 senses. Although when I believed in the void, I saw those godlike existences and displayed various terrifying abilities. But none of them had a clue how to master that power. Now Tony has actually shown changes in energy, which means they can also evolve to master this power. There are unknown new evolutionary directions emerging. If you don't understand them, you can't talk about pursuing evolution. Okay, Tony nodded when he heard this, and then threw the ball in the air ahead. Then he leapt into the sky like an eagle, and the purple energy attached to the volleyball burst into even more dazzling light. Tony hit the ball with all his strength, and there was a boom. The volleyball withstood Tony's power and hit Renly like a purple magic star. This scene is very spectacular. The purple volleyball is like a purple magic star streaking through the air, bringing up a purple stream of light, carrying a terrifying impact, and is about to fall to the earth and destroy everything. When Renly saw this scene, he didn't dare to be too confident. Dozens of afterimages instantly appeared in the 15-meter volleyball court. With the blessing of speed, Renly used the potential energy to meet Tony's magic ball with all his strength. When the magic ball landed on Renly's hands, there was a bang. And the impact began to explode. A pothole appeared directly on the ground under Renly's feet, and the terrible impact made it difficult for Renly's hands to lift up. Renaud let out a series of low roars, and a pit 10 meters wide and more than 1 meter deep appeared on the ground before he lifted the ball and caught it. This scene made everyone around them widen their eyes with disbelief. They had also heard some words just now. Tony's ball carries energy from the void. This kind of power is unheard of. However, when they saw this impact, they all came to a consensus that mastering void energy would give them greater power. After Renly hit the volleyball, he also moved quickly and jumped up to fight back with a fierce slap. Boom! A sound like thunder erupted on the beach, shocking the people around him. The volleyball was blessed with void energy and did not explode even after it withstood a full blow from Tony and Renly. Faced with this blow, Tony's eyes showed fighting spirit, and he was not afraid to brace himself, squat down, stabilize his lower body, and catch the ball forcefully. When the collision just occurred, the impact that erupted made Tony feel his whole body shaking, and the beach under his feet was also affected by the impact, causing a large amount of sand to spread outward. Fortunately, the main direction of Renly's evolution was speed, so although this full force blow made Tony lose a little strength and his hands felt a burning sting, he still took it. Tony launched a counterattack again. The two of them were like two super forts, and every serve caused a terrifying shock and impact. The volleyball withstood 5 full force blows from each other, which was when Renly served for the last time. The volleyball still couldn't withstand the force and exploded with a bang. It's so enjoyable. Tony, how long have you mastered this ability? Renly showed some surprise on his face, but when he fell down, he laughed and asked. It's been half a year, but I didn't have much void power at the beginning, so I didn't use it much. It wasn't until after evolving many times that the power of void in the body became more. But I don't know what effect the power of the void has. I just gave it a try. I don't know if we can strengthen volleyball, but now it seems to be successful. Tony didn't hide anything after hearing this, and said with a smile, with some excitement in his eyes. Because if it can be blessed on a volleyball, it means it can be blessed on other objects, such as his steel armor. Although Tony still doesn't know yet, after being blessed by the power of the void, in addition to increasing the power and endurance, whether there will be a time limit or other hazards. But today's discovery definitely opened up a new path for his technology. The performance of his steel armor may reach a level that he could not imagine in the past. How much power did you use to strengthen that volleyball just now? Renly said thoughtfully after hearing Tony's words. He is undoubtedly greedy for the void power shown by Tony, so he naturally wants to know more. 1/5, I just exploded just when I thought about it, so I didn't deliberately hold back. Tony heard the words and felt the remaining void power in his body. Today can be considered a coincidence, because he participated in this competition and was unable to use the steel armor that he relied on most. That's why he wanted to use the power in his body to see if he could bring some strength help to his serve. The most important thing is that the opponent is Renly, an opponent that he is not sure he can defeat even if he puts on the steel armor, and the object of the void power is volleyball. When the opponent is strong enough and the enhanced items have no cost, Tony naturally has no scruples. That means as long as it's under control, it can increase the power of the volleyball, but the endurance is only enough to deliver one blow. You need to practice more. After hearing this, Renly thought about it for a moment and said. Tony's grasp of the power of the void is obviously very rough and unfamiliar, but unfamiliarity is not a problem. The important thing is the difference between those who have and those who don't, just like superpowers and ordinary people. The former has mastered a certain power. Even if it is very unfamiliar at first, it will become proficient as long as it is practiced more. The latter doesn't have superpowers, so it's better that he doesn't even have a chance to control them. Well, I just discovered it today, and I want to combine it with my technology. Maybe it can bring about brand new technology. If it happens, I would like to call it void technology. Tony said with a smile upon hearing this. But Tony, how did you come up with the idea of evolving the power of the void? Renly was still curious as to why Tony could think of this. Because now the members of the void cult are all strengthening their bodies. Their strong physical fitness can bring a lot of conveniences and they will have more chances of survival when facing danger. Although evolution seems to be infinite, the speed of evolution will significantly decrease as the number of evolutions increases. Therefore, everyone's communication needs to pay attention to the number and direction of evolution at the beginning. In the end, Tony was better off. He ignored his body and evolved the power of the void that even Tony himself didn't understand. I am also on a whim, and I want to try everything. Tony paused after hearing this and said haha. Of course, he couldn't say that he saw Harvey's incredible abilities and wanted to get those powers. In this way, in the eyes of others, he would be using Harvey's reputation to publicize himself. On a whim, that's right. Your main method of making money is not fighting but inventing. So the need for the evolution of the physical body is not that great. Renly had no doubts when he heard this. Speaking of which, many members of the Void cult will choose the direction of evolving the physical body, mainly because of that guy Kyle. I had just joined the Void cult, and when I saw Kyle, a big man, showing his terrifying physical strength, I subconsciously moved closer to him. Lacey, on the other hand, has met many bounty hunters, has more knowledge, and knows the main reliance of some second-level bounty hunters. Therefore, Lacey focused on the balance of evolution between strength and speed. Moreover, Lacey was a ruthless person and evolved rapidly in a short period of time, which made Lacey's current strength quite impressive. But now everyone has discovered the power that Tony has. Even if Tony is not familiar with using it at the moment, everyone can see the infinite potential symbolized by the power of the void. This is very likely to be one of the cores of void evolution. As for why it is one of the cores, it is because the gods in the void they saw also had what looked like the ultimate evolution of physical beings. They were as huge as a galaxy and could hold a planet in their mouth. Facing an existence that was so huge that it could only be described as terrifying, any attack would hardly pose any threat to it. If it is assisted by the power of the void, its strength will be unimaginably powerful. The ball exploded. This time I lost. Let's go, I'll treat you to a meal. Immediately, Renly came to Tony and said with a smile. You haven't lost yet, it's only 1 point. Although Tony really wanted to beat Renly, he also knew that he made a mistake and only got 1 point first. Just thank you for letting me see such a good thing. It can be said that it points out a new path for us in the future. So I have to treat you to a big meal no matter what. After hearing this, Renly changed his reason and said with a smile. I like this sentence. When Tony heard this, he stopped worrying about winning or losing, and a smile appeared on his face. Kyle, Lacey and the Predictor also came over at this time, wanting to gain some experience with Tony, and they walked towards the restaurant together. Lacey, Kyle, who of you two won just now? Tony asked casually on the way. It was originally 2-2 and it was hard to decide the winner. But Kyle was distracted in the fight just now, so I won. My current record with Kyle is 6 wins and 5 losses. When Lacey heard this, she made a yes gesture and said with a smile. Kyle, can you lose so much? Tony looked at Kyle in confusion when he heard these words. Not just this volleyball competition, but also other sports competitions. A lot of competitive sports have a ceiling on strength. It makes me unable to exert my own strength. I had a chance to win this match, but your power of void attracted my attention. Facing Tony's weird eyes, Kyle said with a depressed look on his face. As long as there were no restrictions and it was a competition that completely compared strength and speed, Lacey couldn't beat him. But once it comes to limiting his strength and testing his skills, he will lose easily. After all, sometimes when competing with others, it is easy to lose control of one's strength and directly destroy the things needed for competition. Don't forget that the original intention of these competitions is not to simply win or lose, but to improve your control of strength. Our power will be strengthened almost every few days. If we don't control it well, it can easily cause big trouble. The Prophet glanced at Kyle and reminded him. By the way, Senior Tony, your physical fitness is very strong. It seems that the number of times you have evolved is no less than 100 times, but it can be seen that your control of your own power is weak. Research is a good thing, but I suggest that you occasionally participate in various projects organized by the religion. And go to the gravity room regularly. Lacey looked at Tony and gave some advice. Well, I just discovered it today. I will find time to play more in the future. But I went to see the gravity room. Otherwise, how do you think I developed the gravity device? Tony heard this suggestion and said directly. I'm not going to see the gravity chamber, but I want you to take a walk inside the gravity chamber. Renly has never been able to burst out at top speed within a range of 15 meters and still be able to perfectly control his speed before. This is all the result of hard practice. We are all members of the Void God religion. The world we will come into contact with and the battles we will encounter in the future will definitely not be just ordinary people. But any enemy and any weird environment are likely to be encountered. Adapting to various special environments in advance will allow you to adapt immediately when you encounter them in the future. Lacey said slowly after hearing this. In addition to various competitive events, they also go to the gravity room to practice. Currently, she can withstand 20 times the force of gravity and carry out exercises with equipment. Predictors can only withstand 10 times the gravity at most, so they bring all kinds of equipment they usually use to exercise. This is already very scary for the precog before joining the Void cult. The precog has become a second-level bounty hunter by virtue of his precognitive ability and his various skills. Nowadays, the physical abilities of the prophets have been greatly enhanced. I am afraid only the prophets themselves know how strong they are. Kyle can withstand 40 times the force of gravity, bring equipment, and perform exercises. Renly chose to exercise in a different direction than them, but to increase the gravity one by one while carrying his usual insights. Now, after more than half a year in the world, Renault is able to break through to one speed of sound while withstanding 5 times the force of gravity. Most of the other members of the Void Cult followed suit and continued to hone their own strength and skills. I see, then I have to find time to go for a walk. Tony said thoughtfully after hearing this. Renault just exploded instantly, and dozens of afterimages appeared, which looked cool. But just now he only noticed the cool side, but failed to notice the terrifying control hidden under this coolness. Not to mention catching up with Harvey, other people who also belong to the Void Cult are making rapid progress. If I only focus on research and don't delve into the power of senior people, I don't necessarily know when I will be completely thrown away. A few people went to the restaurant talking and laughing. And in Harvey's villa, Mr. Cassidy, do you also want to play that kind of competition? Sonia asked when she saw Mr. Cassidy standing on the balcony, looking in the direction of the beach. I think so, but it's not convenient for me to go. Hearing this, Harvey did not hide his desire to join in the fun and spoke. According to what Sonia said, everyone in the Void Cult now worships him extremely. He needs to maintain his majesty in front of other members of the Void Cult. In addition, if he goes, the members of the Void Cult will feel uncomfortable. So even if he wanted to have some fun, there was nothing he could do. The same goes for me. I can only take a look nearby and cannot participate. Because I represent Mr. Cassidy's external image. If I go to participate, it will be fine if I win, but if I lose, it may make them think that I am not worthy of my reputation as a steward. When Sonia heard that Mr. Cassidy did not hide anything, she also stood by the balcony, looked at the position on the beach in the distance, and said, as Mr. Cassidy's housekeeper, she often needs to check various situations on the island and observe the actions of each member. Naturally, I know that every competitive event held on the island is very lively. As long as they don't have to go out to work or do errands, but are members of the Void Cult on the island, they will go and watch the excitement even if they don't participate. She also wanted to go, but her status only allowed her to watch nearby, not participate. There's no way I can't participate, but you don't have to worry so much. Just because you are my butler does not mean that you are necessarily the strongest. Harvey heard that Sonia also wanted to play, paused, and said, he is the believer of the Void God religion. As someone else's believer, he will naturally not do anything that undermines his majesty. In Blue Star, he doesn't have to worry so much if he uses his original identity as Harvey. However, when he used Cassidy's identity, there must be some areas where he needed to exercise self-restraint. It makes me very happy to know that Mr. Cassidy has agreed to let me go. But other members of the Void Cult don't think so. Their potential first impression must be that I am very powerful as your butler. And he knows a lot of knowledge about the Void. In fact, I don't know much about Void. If I get too close to them, they will ask about it. I can't guarantee I'll be able to respond, Sonia said with a smile when she heard Mr. Cassidy's words. Sonia, if you go by an uninhabited island, make sure it's big. Harvey heard Sonia's words, thought about it, and spoke. He does not require Sonia to be very powerful, so he does not care whether Sonia will damage his majesty. However, Sonia's serious character took the initiative to impose some restrictions on herself, regarding what she thought she could do and what she couldn't do. And what Sonia said is indeed a big problem. Others will impose their first impression on Sonia. Then ask Sonia about things related to the Void. If the result of the inquiry is not satisfactory, it is easy to reduce trust and admiration. You still have 2 billion in savings. It's not difficult to buy another island, but what are you buying it for? I have completely arranged Mr. Tony's affairs, Sonia said with some confusion after hearing this. There are so many people on the island that it is not suitable to build a sports ground, so I just bought the best one on the island. I established the Void Divine religion not to cause trouble for myself. Since we can't join in, then we can just play by ourselves. Since you can't do whatever you want on the island, you can go out once in a while. Harvey heard this and spoke. Am I following you? Sonia heard Mr. Cassidy's words and thought she had heard wrongly. Well, just go and do it. Harvey nodded upon hearing this. Okay, Sonia received the response and confirmed that she heard it correctly, and nodded happily. When Mr. Cassidy wanted to buy a large space battleship, she thought it was too wasteful because she couldn't use such a high-end one. Mr. Tony cannot study large space battleships for the time being, and they will be used as decorations in a short period of time after buying them. But this time, because this is what Mr. Cassidy wants to use, and the island was bought and left there, it will not be difficult to develop the island and turn a profit even if Mr. Cassidy doesn't use it in the future. And now Mr. Tony's factory has been purchased. When the delivery is successful, the tax will be deducted, and Mr. Tony will share a cent, and he will receive more than 300 million yuan. After that, she earned at least several hundred million every year, and she no longer had to worry too much about money. Then Sonia set off directly in the fighter plane. Because I had previously investigated the nearby islands, I knew who owned those islands, so it was not that difficult to get in touch and communicate. Harvey knew that in a few days he would be able to occasionally do other things, relax, and not worry about things on the beach. Tony has shown the power of the Void, and it would be a good thing for other members of the Void cult to know about it. 5 days passed in this way. Sonia only spent 530 million to buy a small island of 506 square kilometers. Because it is more than 400 nautical miles away from the nearby Falling Star Harbor, access is not that convenient, and it is an uninhabited island, so the price is relatively low. There is no need to worry about members of the Void cult coming over. Harvey went directly to the island with various things that Sonia bought to decorate the venue. After arriving on the island, Sonia changed into a white swimsuit. Her large fair skin seemed to sparkle in the sun. Coupled with her angelic face and proud figure, it was enough to easily capture the attention of men. "Mr. Cassidy, does this suit me?" After Sonia changed her clothes and walked out, she found Mr. Cassidy looking at her with a smile on his face. "Well, it's a good fit." Harvey's eyes flickered when he saw Sonia's smile, and then he nodded. After hearing Mr. Cassidy's compliment, Sonia happily started to lay the ground. Harvey found that with some of Sonia's actions and charm, the desire in his heart was aroused. However, Harvey quickly suppressed it, and Sonia was the housekeeper he hired. The reason why he left many things to Sonia without any burden was because Sonia was his housekeeper. As long as his instructions did not require Sonia to spend the night with him, Sonia would not feel wronged or angry. But if he crosses the line of employment relationship, he will either spend a lot of money to cut off the relationship, or he will have concerns on Xandar. If he is concerned, he may not be able to return to Blue Star alone in peace and contentment. Harvey now just wants to get rid of his kidneys and not his heart. There are already so many beauties in Blue Star, not to mention the vast universe. If you just want to vent some of your inner desires, there are plenty of candidates, and you don't have to cross the line between yourself and Sonia. "It's all set, Mr. Cassidy." Sonia felt that Mr. Cassidy was looking at her, but she did not feel scared or shy. Instead, she was happy. She smiled and waved to Mr. Cassidy, who was sitting under the tree enjoying the shade. After hearing this, Harvey took off his armor and changed into a male swimsuit, revealing his strong and tall figure. This dazzled Sonia, but when she moved her eyes upward and saw Mr. Cassidy's face that remained unchanged and was covered by golden light, she suddenly felt that the charm in her heart disappeared. It would be great if Mr. Cassidy's face was not like this, but more handsome. This was not just the first time that Sonia thought this way. It was also because the charm in her heart was gone that Sonia calmed down a lot. The two tried various competitive sports on this uninhabited island. There are winners and losers between each other, and Harvey will lose mainly because he will blow up the ball. Harvey found that it was not that easy to perfectly control the power and win the game without exploding these competitive supplies. In comparison, Sonia is easier to control because she has seen more and is not that powerful. When the time came on the way, Harvey took Sonia directly back to the villa on Void Island to have dinner and play again. It can be said that the two of them were very devoted to the game. Sonia was happy because she didn't have to worry about damaging Mr. Cassidy's majesty in front of other members of the Void cult, so she could play freely. Harvey, on the other hand, started fighting with the ball, trying his best to figure out what kind of power he could use to serve the ball perfectly. In this way, the two of them played from morning to afternoon. "Mr. Cassidy, there are new visitors on the island, ready to arrive at the temple." I'm very sorry to disturb your interest, but I think I should go back and take a look at them. Sonia suddenly received a message. After understanding it, she still showed some apology on her face, lowered her head slightly, and said embarrassedly. It was rare that Mr. Cassadine was willing to invite her to play together, and only she and Mr. Cassadine knew about it. She felt very happy about the excitement of having a secret meeting. But even if she hides on this island and has no restraints, it doesn't mean that she has nothing to deal with. It's okay, just play next time. Harvey heard this and spoke. Is there a next time? Sonia was a little surprised when she heard this. This island is meant for you and me to relax. Of course there will be a next time. Harvey said matter-of-factly. When Sonia heard this, her eyes lit up instantly and she nodded. Let's go, you have to go back and change clothes quickly. When Harvey saw Sonia's happy look, he moved and grabbed Sonia's hand. The next second, the two of them returned to the villa on Void Island. Sonia went directly to take a shower, then changed her clothes and quickly went to the temple. In this way, Harvey's daily life on Xandar planet, in addition to eating, drinking and playing every day, he had another pastime. From time to time, when Sonia is not busy for a while, the two of them will go to a private uninhabited island to compete. Time flies, more than 3 months have passed quickly, and it is October. The gravity device made by Tony was delivered smoothly, and the other party also paid the balance after acceptance. After tax is deducted, there are still 720 million left. Tony only took 120 million for this, planning to purchase various models of space fighters for research in the future, and leaving some money to use as his daily expenses for eating and drinking. The 240 million he still deserved was given back to Harvey as repayment. He had been eating and drinking at public expense before, and also lived in Harvey's villa. So Tony knew very well that he owed Harvey enough, so Tony always kept the number in mind. It has been 10 months since Tony came to the universe, and there are still 2 months before he returns home. In just 10 months, Tony learned a lot of knowledge. Nanotechnology has also been studied in depth now, but it cannot be applied to armor yet. However, he is not in a hurry. It is only a matter of time before he can develop the nano armor. There are 4 biggest gains in these 9 months. The first is that he has formed deep friendships with many members of the Void cult. Especially Renly, Predictor, Kyle, and Lacey. If he is in trouble in the future, he will definitely come if he asks them for help. The second is that he discovered that the power of the Void is indeed a mysterious thing that can bless various materials. But there is a disadvantage. After being blessed by the power of the Void, the durability will decrease, and it can only last for 10 minutes before being broken into pieces. Even if it is left unused for a period of time, the blessed material will automatically break into pieces within about 10 days and a half. I don't know if the material that can withstand the power of the Void is too weak, or for some reason. Tony has not yet figured it out. However, his steel armor can also temporarily gain stronger performance by adding the power of the Void. He named that mode Void mode. However, the performance of the steel armor, which has now been updated to the 45th generation, is enough for him to deal with many enemies. Therefore, steel is usually not used in Void mode, so there is no need to worry about burning money like crazy. The third is that he has begun to move towards wealth and freedom in the universe. In just 1 or 2 years, he will definitely have the money to transport back a large amount of materials and elements that Blue Star lacks. The fourth is that after special training by Renly and others, he has become more precise in controlling his own strength. Even without the steel armor, Tony's combat effectiveness is still very powerful. It can be said that the plan is going very smoothly and is moving towards the goal he set before coming to the universe. But when he thought about returning to Blue Star, he had to tighten his belt and wear steel armor all the time to show off to others. Tony is inevitably a little depressed. It would be great if he knew Harvey's Void magic, so that he could change his appearance and make it easier to move. He actually asked Harvey for this, but Harvey said that his manipulation of the power of the Void was so rubbish that he couldn't teach him even if he wanted to. But the thought of hiding his identity, only temporarily, made Tony feel less depressed. Mr. Tony, a new order has arrived. This time the total is 2.4 billion, and a down payment of 1.2 billion has been made. I heard that you are going back to Blue Star in 2 months, right? If you're not around then, will you be able to complete the final steps? On this day, Sonia took the initiative to contact Tony. A month passed after Mr. Tony delivered the goods. After various tests, the other party was full of praise for the gravity device made by Mr. Tony. Not only can a medium-sized warship realize different gravity modes in different areas, it can also automatically adapt to change gravity according to the environment. The most important thing is that it can release a gravity position to directly affect the environment around the battleship. It can help battleships achieve more precise acceleration and deceleration. It can be said to be a masterpiece of gravity devices. If you want to buy a gravity device of this level, it will cost at least 8 million to 10 million, and you have to curry favor with the production company to be able to buy some. However, the gravity device made by Tony Stark is fully functional and cheap. The key is that his attitude is not aloof at all. The production period of the order is also very short, and there is no shoddy work to fool people. Unlike when they purchased before, even if they were willing to pay, the other party would delay the completion of the work. Occasionally, some products may be defective, but you can't complain. If you complain, the other party will not be willing to sell them to you. Of course, as long as I specially create an intelligent AI to help with subsequent processing. When Tony heard these words, he looked up at Sonia and nodded. Since he wants to go back to Blue Star, he naturally wants to take Jarvis back. There is no way he can leave Jarvis here. How long will you have to go back then? I will note the time. If it takes a long time, I will make a list and let you look at it then. After you make sure the accounts are correct, I will transfer the money to you. Sonia heard the words and spoke. Not sure yet, but it should be at least a few months. As for the list, you don't need to worry about it. You are Cassidon's butler, I can rest assured. Tony said with a smile upon hearing this. When will he return to the universe? It depends on Pepper's opinion. But after a year, Pepper would definitely have to stay with her for a while before she was willing to let him go. Even if you trust me, Mr. Tony, this is a work matter. And the amounts involved are not low, so it's better to make the division clearer. Sonia shook her head slightly when she heard this and said seriously. Okay, I'll take a look at the list then and settle the bill. Tony saw Sonia's serious look and glanced at Harvey. Seeing that Harvey had no expression, he could only nod. Will you go to Blue Star for a walk when Cassidon arrives? Immediately, Tony looked at Harvey and asked. He said going rather than returning because no one in the Void Cult knew exactly where Cassidon came from. Naturally, he would not make such a stupid mistake in these conversations. Well, I should go over and have some fun then. Harvey nodded upon hearing this. 2011 is the time for Captain America's recovery, and it is also close to the time for the first Avengers assembly. What if he doesn't go back? Sonia heard from the sidelines that Mr. Cassidon was going to Blue Star, and knew that Mr. Cassidon would also be away for a while. Although she felt a little reluctant to leave, she didn't say anything. Sonia now knows that the relationship between Mr. Tony and Mr. Cassidon is not like ordinary friends, but the kind of good friends. Because as far as she knew, Mr. Tony was the second person besides her who also knew Mr. Cassidon's true nature. However, Mr. Tony's confidentiality work was also very good, and no scandals about Mr. Cassidon were reported on the island. Will you take Miss Sonia there then? But although Tony didn't mean to expose himself, he asked a question that was gossipy in his mind. As soon as this question came out, Sonia was a little shocked and looked at Mr. Cassidon. Tony, stop joking. Harvey was speechless when he saw Tony's gossipy look. I'm not kidding, you let Miss Sonia wait on you for so long. There will be no one else waiting for you when you get back. Are you used to coming here? I just came here, and you were the first to find a secretary for me. Otherwise, without Pepper taking care of me, I would definitely not be able to adapt to the environment here. When Tony heard this, he spread his hands and said seriously. I know that you need someone to take care of you in your daily life, but can you please stop being so proud? Harvey felt a little helpless when he saw Tony's proud look on his face even though he couldn't take good care of himself. This is the truth, there is nothing I dare not say. Tony didn't care at all when he heard this. Sonia needs to see the island. There are many things on the island that Sonia needs to deal with, so she can't come with me. Besides, I didn't have anyone to wait on me before. I didn't live well. At most, I just went there and stayed there. I was a little unaccustomed to it. Harvey glanced at Sonia when he heard this, then looked at Tony and said, "The lack of her on the island is indeed a problem." After Tony heard this, he stopped trying to persuade her. He spread his hands towards Sonia and said that there was nothing he could do. As a veteran in love, Tony had picked up countless girls. How could he not see that Sonia had thoughts about Harvey? As long as Harvey gives a nod, Sonia will definitely be willing to throw herself into his arms. But Harvey didn't know why, but he didn't cross that line. If Harvey said it was because he was shy or worried about breaking the relationship or being restrained, he wouldn't believe it to death. He wasn't afraid. Whenever he had the chance, he would go out and eat secretly. At most, he had to restrain himself a little and don't let Pepper find out. And based on Harvey's ability to travel across tens of thousands of light years in a few seconds and his ability to change clothes at will, finding a wife on every planet wouldn't be a problem for Harvey. And after observing her for the past 10 months, Tony found that although Sonia did not fully meet Harvey's strong criteria for choosing a mate, however, Sonia meets the other two advantages besides being strong. She is beautiful, smart enough, and capable of doing things. Sonia smiled and shook her head when she saw Mr. Tony's actions towards her. "I'm going back to work on intelligent AI, so I won't disturb your two-person world." Tony was originally invited to talk about work matters when he came here. He only talked about returning to Blue Star when Sonia mentioned it just now. Now that the matter was settled, Tony naturally said a few words and ran away. You don't need to take Tony's words seriously. He has a mean mouth, but there's nothing wrong with him. After Harvey saw Tony flying away in steel armor, he looked at Sonia and said, "Okay, I know." Sonia felt a little shy when she heard about the world of two people, but she didn't show it on the surface. Instead, she smiled and nodded. Harvey saw that Sonia neither blushed nor looked concerned. To be honest, it was sometimes difficult for him to see what Sonia was thinking. "I'll go to Blue Star then, when I'm not here. If you feel you are too busy, you can reduce some orders. We all live long lives and have plenty of time, so it's not a problem to make less money. You should be optimistic about the situation of other members on the island, and it is more important to make your own strength stronger." But since we just talked about returning to Blue Star, Harvey naturally gave a few instructions. Sonia knew what Mr. Cassidy said, so she knew that Mr. Cassidy's departure would probably take longer than before. "I will handle it according to my ability. Mr. Cassidy doesn't need to worry." Then I'm at work now and got an accurate answer from Mr. Tony. I haven't responded to those people yet. However, Sonia still didn't say anything like she hoped Mr. Cassidy would come back soon, because she could tell because of her identity, so she just nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Well, go ahead." Harvey nodded upon hearing this. Immediately, Sonia left, leaving Harvey alone in the living room. Harvey picked up the drink Sonia had prepared for him and drank it. "There are other things on my mind as well. Because there are no disaster-related monsters to eat in the universe, Harvey's evolution has slowed down a lot. Now Harvey needs 2 million energy points to evolve once. He spends a lot of money on eating 5 meals a day, and gets an average of 370,000 energy points every day. So 10 months have passed, and it has only evolved 55 times. The number of evolutions now reaches 587. The various skills of Kha'Zix, the Void Reaver, have also been greatly evolved. Invisible Threat Evolution Level 50. When there is only one target within 5 meters of the target you are fighting, you will be in an isolated and helpless state. Facing enemies in this state, your cutting and penetration abilities will be greatly enhanced. Promote. Taste the Fear Evolution Level 80, instantly delivering 40 silent stabs. If the enemy is in an isolated and helpless state, the power will be greatly increased. The evolution level of Void Thrust is 80. It instantly releases explosive thrusts containing toxins around itself. The creature that hits will return its own life energy, which can accelerate the healing of all its own injuries. The current angle is 360 degrees, covering a range of 10,000 rice. If the target is in an isolated and helpless state, the power will be increased and the effect of absorbing life energy will be increased. Leap Attack Evolution Level 80, an instant burst of terrifying power to jump and land, the jump is greatly improved, the power when landing is greatly increased, and the flying speed is greatly increased. Void attack level 80. Escape into the darkness of the void. Your own speed will be greatly increased, and you can ignore all matter and shuttle through the dark void. In the darkness, no living thing will be able to detect you. The void skin has evolved 150 times, the mental resistance has evolved 65 times, and the breath has evolved twice. Now as long as he does not directly threaten Blue Star, Ji will not take action against her. Even if Ji takes action, it will be difficult for him at most and he will run away. This strength gave Harvey confidence and security. He already had enough ability to protect himself before the emergence of all the great gods. Now as long as Thanos doesn't let Thanos collect all 6 Infinity Stones, or even capture the 6 Infinity Stones himself, he doesn't have to worry about being destroyed by a snap of his fingers. Over the next month and a half, Harvey found that Sonya was still doing what she had to do. The appearance of not being affected at all made Harvey feel at ease. During this period, Tony also asked Sonya to help buy some things, all of which were minerals or special materials found only on alien planets. It was on this day that Tony came to the door. "Harvey, I'm going to fly back tomorrow. I checked the wormholes on the route. The journey back will take about 3 days. I plan to go back early to give Pepper a surprise. By the way, I can spend Christmas with Pepper." Tony came to Harvey's villa wearing a steel suit and said, "You didn't tell Pepper that you were going back?" Harvey said with some surprise when he heard Tony's words. "If I said it, it wouldn't be a surprise. I even told Pepper to extend some time to go back," Tony said with a smile upon hearing this. Although he said that he would delay his return, Pepper complained for a while, but she will definitely be happy when he returns early. "Have you said goodbye to the rest of the people on the island? You may not be able to come back soon if you go back this time." Harvey heard this and spoke. Although Tony's strength has improved a lot, after 2011, Tony will not be able to escape easily for the time being. Quote. Tony was a little confused when he heard Harvey say that he wouldn't be back in a short time. He originally planned to go back and spend Christmas with Pepper then, and then spend some time with Pepper. He will be back in about half a year. There is no need to say goodbye after only half a year. Anyway, it's not a long time since we last met. But Tony also knew that Harvey had the ability to see through everything. I understand that Harvey can't suddenly say this. Since he said it, it means that there may be some things that will catch him up and make him temporarily unable to escape. Okay, I'll go down and say hello to them before I leave. So Tony thought for a moment and felt that it was necessary to do it, so he nodded and left immediately. How long do you plan to stay on C-53 Blue Star when Mr. Cassidon arrives? At this time, Sonya on the side couldn't bear it anymore and asked. It depends on the situation. I'll probably stay there for a while, watch the show, and then come back. Harvey was stunned for a moment when he heard that Sonya actually asked, but he also talked about the next trip. Watching a good show, Sonya asked a little strangely after hearing this. Well, in a few years there should be a guy named Star-Lord coming to Xandar. When you hear the news about him, send me a message. Harvey nodded when he heard this and said, Star-Lord, that's a name I've never heard of. A few years later, Mr. Cassidon, will you still have the ability to predict things? Sonya's eyes flickered when she heard this. She searched for information related to this name in her memory and found that there was no impression. She said with some surprise. Her mood was a bit complicated when this question was asked. If Mr. Cassidon really has the ability to predict, then her encounter with Mr. Cassidon was also predicted by Mr. Cassidon. What will happen between her and Mr. Cassidon in the future? All the results are predicted by Mr. Cassidon. No, Harvey shook his head when he heard this and said. Only after he gained the ability of the Void Prophet did he gain the ability to predict. Now he only knows some general things happening and cannot see into people's futures. Even if the next hero template appears, he will not consider choosing the Prophet of the Void. Instead, he will choose Void Fear, the hero template of the Big Bug Chogas. Since they all chose the ability of the Void Reaver and continuously strengthened their physical bodies, they must of course take priority over the physical body. The Void Prophet belongs to the magic level. Although magic is very useful, once the body becomes stronger, it will feel safer to act. As long as his body is strong enough and he doesn't die, he can immediately restore himself to his best condition after teleporting away. That's it. Sonia felt a lot more relaxed after hearing Mr. Cassidy's words. Being seen through the future is a good thing if the future is good. If what happens in the future is unfortunate, it will make people not want to face it. Of course, what Sonia is most afraid of is whether Mr. Cassidy has seen through her future with Mr. Cassidy, which is why Mr. Cassidy has no interest in her at all. But now that Mr. Cassidy says no, then what she worries about won't happen. I remember Xandar's New Year seems to be December 20th. Harvey saw Sonia's somewhat lucky look, his eyes flashed, he looked out the window at the snow-covered ice and snow that looked like a white world, and said, "Yeah, what's wrong?" Sonia heard Mr. Cassidy say this suddenly, although it was a little strange, she still answered, "The island should be very lively by then." After hearing this, Harvey thought about it and said, "Even though Xandar is currently in the snowy winter, and many people are too lazy to go out, it is still very lively. The Void Cult now has a total of 427 people. There are currently 314 members on the island, not counting me. These members all plan to celebrate the first year of joining the Void Cult. Many members plan to go back to spend the first day of the new year with their parents and then come to the island to celebrate. And there are plans to go to the temple to worship your statue and thank you for giving them new life. So it's definitely going to be lively." Sonia nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Then I'll stay for the new year and then set off." Harvey said with a smile when he heard that so many people were planning to spend the new year on the island. Real. Sonia was stunned for a moment when she heard that Mr. Cassidy was actually celebrating the new year here. Then she couldn't hide the joy on her face and asked in disbelief, "Of course it's true. Since they all plan to worship my statue collectively, what would it be like if I wasn't on the island?" Harvey nodded upon hearing this. "Great, then I'll go get ready." Sonia had a happy smile on her face after hearing this, and then immediately ran downstairs to get the New Year decorations. Harvey saw Sonia's happy look and didn't say anything. Even if he returns to Blue Star to celebrate the New Year, he will spend it alone. It is better to celebrate the New Year on Void Island, which is more lively. Harvey didn't know much about Sonia's past. He didn't take the initiative to ask, and Sonia didn't take the initiative to mention it. However, Harvey remembered clearly that when Sonia signed for him, in the resume displayed, the column for Sonia's relatives showed none. Maybe he died in an accident, maybe he lost Sonia, or some other reasons. But no matter what the reason is, if he leaves, Sonia will probably spend the new year alone. Although he and Sonia may have long been accustomed to each other, the feeling of celebrating the new year alone, but they are naturally happier to have company to celebrate the new year together. Chapter 131. When Tony found Renly, Lacey, Kyle, and the Predictor were sitting in the big house built by Kyle. There was a fireplace warming up next to them. With their physical condition, it is obviously impossible to feel the cold. However, warming up by fire is due to the season and the weather, and life must have a sense of ritual. After Tony told them that he planned to leave for a while. On December 20th, that is, 5 days later, everyone will go out together to prepare a grand banquet. But you haven't been back for so long, so it's reasonable to go back and see your wife. Anyway, everyone has lived longer now, so it won't be too late to get together again in the future. Renly didn't mind when he heard Tony's news that he was leaving home tomorrow and might be away for a long time. He patted Tony on the shoulder and said with a smile, "It's Xandar's New Year in 5 days. Tony said with some surprise when he heard Renly's words. "Yes, everyone on the island has organized some activities to visit the temple during the New Year." Lacey saw Tony's reaction and said with a smile, "You didn't tell me about such a lively thing earlier." Tony shouted when he heard that many people on the island were planning to hold events. "Ha ha ha, you have been busy in the laboratory for more than a month, so I can't inform you. But you've invited everyone to dinner so many times, so when we organize the event, we only need you to be there. It's just that you have no choice but to go home and celebrate the New Year together in the future." Kyle laughed loudly after hearing this and explained, "Who says there's nothing we can do? I don't know, so I plan to go back tomorrow. But now that I know the news, I naturally do as the Romans do and spend the New Year here before leaving." When Tony heard this, he waved his hand and immediately said that he also wanted to stay for the new year. He returned to Blue Star basically just to celebrate the new year with Pepper, and he had to wear steel armor when traveling to avoid being exposed. Tony himself is a person who likes to be lively. Here he can show himself without any scruples. Naturally, he has to spend the new year here before talking about it. Aren't you going back to spend the new year with your wife? The prophet heard this and spoke. Our Chinese New Year is on December 24th, which is called Christmas. My journey back is only 2 days. So I just need to arrive and set off on the 21st. I can make it back in time. Let's not talk about this anymore. Since the new year is coming, you should prepare the wine, right? Tony heard this and spoke. Of course, I'll have enough wine by then. Kyle said with a smile when he heard these words. That's fine. After Tony decided to stay a few more days, he left. The next few days passed quietly, and Xandar's New Year arrived on December 20th. On this day, it was still dark at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was the time when the bones were cold and ordinary people would hide in bed and sleep to keep warm. The members on Void Island were all in high spirits, lit candles, carried a pile of food and wine and gathered them into a torrent, and began to go to the temple along the avenue. Because believing in the Void cult will increase your appetite, the same goes for Lord Cassidon. So the tributes to Lord Cassidine are naturally various delicacies and fine wines. Everyone chatted along the way, and there were bursts of laughter. Tony wore a steel armor and set off a lot of fireworks. Along with the sound of fireworks, brilliant fireworks exploded, attracting bursts of cheers. Is this called fireworks? Yeah, I heard it's something Blue Star will use to celebrate during the new year. Don't tell me, it's pretty good looking. I heard that during the New Year celebrations on Blue Star, different places have different rituals. Tony, the tycoon, seemed to have only known about the Chinese New Year a few days ago, so he didn't have time to prepare many things. While a group of people were cheering, they were also chatting happily. Now Tony Stark's name can be said to be known to everyone on Void Island. Everyone knows that this is a senior who joined Renault before they did, and this senior is very smart, the technology he produces is very advanced, and he is very rich and heroic. A grand banquet is held every month to treat the members of Void Island to a meal. Currently, Tony Stark's reputation on Void Island is second only to Miss Sonia. The one with the highest reputation is undoubtedly the great god of the Void, Lord Cassidon. A group of people went to the temple in a mighty manner. The temple was decorated with colorful lights and brightly lit. It was not yet dawn, but it looked like a bright temple in the dark. It looked very majestic. In the air in front of the statue of Cassidon, the god of the Void in the temple, there are several huge suspended platforms, enough to accommodate many people. When everyone stepped on the stone stairs and walked halfway, they followed the shouts of 1, 2, 3, and at the same time, they used their strength to jump 10 meters high, carrying a lot of food, and still landed smoothly on the platform. They uniformly delivered the food carried on their shoulders to a stone platform and left some money behind. Thank you to the great god of the Void for your gift. My strength is weak now and I can't repay you in return. I hope the god of the Void will accept my small respect. In the future, my strength will improve, and I will definitely repay the new life given by the god of the Void. After Dam put down 500,000 in cash and the delicacies specially ordered by the chef, he clasped his hands and prayed devoutly. Before, if he wanted to come up with the 500,000 in cash, he would have to scrape it together, but now he only needs to work hard for 3 months to get it together. There is no doubt that his lifestyle has changed dramatically since joining the Void. Others followed suit, offering food and praying devoutly. Among the more than 300 people, the minimum was 500,000, and the larger ones, such as Renly, Kyle, Predictor, and Lacey, were each given 30 million. They all know that the great Lord Cassidon lives on the island, and some people have been lucky enough to see Lord Cassidon on the island. Not to mention the value of this large amount of food, the contribution amount alone was a full 300 million, which directly piled up into a small mountain. However, they all felt at ease after confessing, but Tony felt embarrassed when he saw this scene. Tony just wanted to shout that this was different from what he had promised. Renault and the others had clearly told themselves before that it would be fine as long as others arrived. The results are all good now. Each of these guys made a tribute, said blessings and asked for peace of mind. But he only had some temporary fireworks to celebrate, so he didn't have much preparation. Now even if he wanted to prepare, it was too late. He could directly transfer tens of millions or even hundreds of millions, but he couldn't get so much cash at once. Although the money he has already earned from helping Harvey can be counted in the hundreds of millions, he will earn more in the future, and it doesn't matter whether he pays these contributions or not. But the feeling that everyone did it but you didn't made Tony feel a little depressed. Just when everyone had finished their worship, Tony was left thinking about how to resolve this embarrassment. Lord Cassidon, the god of the void, has listened to your prayers and will come here soon. A sweet sound pierced the night sky and resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone heard the sound and looked over. Sonia, who was wearing a long black dress and had an angelic face, was walking out of the temple. Normally, they would take a closer look at Miss Sonia and then give her a few heartfelt compliments. But at this moment, all their attention was focused on what Miss Sonia said just now. Lord Cassidon is coming soon, will they be lucky enough to meet him? Thinking of this, everyone did not dare to say anything and looked at Miss Sonia quietly. When Tony saw this rescue, he was extremely grateful to Harvey and took the opportunity to sneak back. Just when everyone was guessing where the great Lord Cassidon would appear from, a huge purple black hole appeared in the sky above Void Island, filled with the power of deep purple void. This was supposed to be a scene that symbolized terror. But as the purple black hole reflected the starlight in the sky, it attracted the admiration of all members of the Void cult. A body of more than 200 meters, with purple starlight as its body, wearing a white robe, golden armor, and a golden mask. The specific appearance cannot be seen clearly, but its eyes are like a pair of golden wheels, emitting bright golden light. A huge figure over 200 meters tall. Holding a gleaming void blade made of stars in his right hand, he stepped out of the purple black hole, as if he had reached out from a distant galaxy and landed here. With the appearance of this figure, everyone held their breath. Even Sonia, who had met Mr. Cassidon countless times and was used to the lazy Mr. Cassidon, held her breath when she saw this mysterious, majestic and powerful figure. Even Tony, who knew that this was just an incarnation of Harvey, looked in disbelief when he saw this scene. The great god of the void has arrived. As the divine shadow descended and purple void energy was released, the entire island was bathed in purple starlight, creating a stunning scene. Many people on Xandar saw that amazing vision from a long distance away. Hundreds of soldiers of the Nova Legion erupted into an unconcealable purple light in the southeast direction of Xandar City with horrified faces. Several generals of the Nova Corps also had solemn expressions on their faces. Norman, when you asked for a meeting last time, there was really nothing wrong with your wording, right? A dignified and luxurious woman looked at Norman Halls and asked. Following your instructions, I have definitely shown enough kindness to pay $1 billion to talk to him. But this Cassidon doesn't want to meet us. Norman Halls, a burly blonde man, said with a serious face when he heard this question. I originally planned to estimate how difficult this guy would be, but I didn't expect it to reach this level. If so much energy were to explode at this distance, the impact would be directly radiated to Xandar City. The protective shield has been activated. Let's check the opponent's movements first. If he wants to fight with us, it shouldn't be possible to break out on his island. Instead, he will come directly to Xandar City. Several Centurions were exchanging opinions. They are all elite generals, wearing Samsung's new star uniforms. They are strong enough to fly quickly in the vacuum of space, and have seen many powerful enemies. But none of them have ever seen a being like Cassidon, the god of the void. Cassidon cannot be described as a human being, but as a monster, demon, or god to describe the threat that Cassidon symbolizes. Facing an unknown and powerful existence, when the other party does not release hostility. Their Nova Corps also wanted to communicate with Cassidon to see what Cassidon planned to do. But Cassidon didn't give him a chance to ask for a meeting before, so it was hard for them to come directly to him. If it is believed that he intends to force the other party to obey and a fight breaks out, there will be a large number of casualties on Xandar. So it has been postponed until now, but their surveillance and observation of Void Island has never weakened, and has even been strengthened a lot. Therefore, even during this new year, when everyone planned to spend time with their families, a vision appeared on Void Island. An alarm was immediately launched, notifying all centurions and soldiers of the Nova Corps. A meeting was started as soon as possible to discuss how to deal with this situation. As for the results of the current discussion, we still have to wait and see. I hope the other party has some morals. Even if they want to fight, they won't start a fight on New Year's Day, when thousands of families are celebrating. I am deeply sorry that your holiday has been interrupted, but please centurions be prepared to attack at any time. The Supreme Commander of Xandar, Orani Rail, stood in the command room, looking at the projections all around, and gave instructions. Yes, several centurions responded in unison. In the Void Island, after the arrival of the great Void God, Lord Cassidon. Welcome to the great God of the Void. Hundreds of people didn't need anyone to direct them. With a swishing sound, they all knelt down on one knee and lowered their heads. Their uniform voices shook the sky. The respect and admiration in their words made people moved when they heard them. Tony heard these words, saw this scene, felt this infectious energy, and felt that the atmosphere had reached this point, and it seemed inappropriate for him not to follow along. So Tony couldn't help but landed from the sky and joined the crowd. The Void God religion does not have many rules except for its doctrine and 3 commandments. I have seen and heard your sincere prayers, devout faith, and growth. So keep your head up. Today is the New Year of Xandar, a day of reunion, celebration and liveliness. Whether you are from Xandar or not, follow the local customs and celebrate to your heart's content. After Harvey used Cassidon's true form to descend, he stood in the air, looked down at the hundreds of people below, and spoke words that resounded throughout the world, with some appreciation in his words. Yes, when everyone heard these words, they responded in unison. It is precisely because the Void God religion does not have many rules and regulations, so most of them subconsciously follow the only 3 commandments. Even though many people have never seen Lord Cassidon, the God of the Void, on the island, they still maintain their devout faith. Now the great Lord Cassidon, the God of the Void, has arrived, letting them know that what they saw and heard is true, and they are even more in awe of the Void in their hearts. When everyone looks up, Cassidon, the God of the Void, stepped down with one step, and his body seemed to have escaped into the void, disappearing without a trace in an instant. This scene made the eyes of the members of the Void cult present become even more fanatical. This is exactly what they saw when they first believed in the Void, the ability to reach the sky and the earth in one step across the galaxy. After the God of the Void left, the starlight covering the sky of the entire Void Island slowly faded, turning into a strange scene. As the starlight faded and the sky became brighter, the sky gradually became brighter, revealing a clear sky, and everyone slowly stood up. I was lucky enough to meet the great Lord Cassidon today. Those who went back to celebrate the New Year will definitely regret it if they know they missed it. But there is nothing we can do about it. They plan to come the next day. No one expected that the great Lord Cassidon, the God of the Void, would show up. Everyone had a look of excitement on their faces that had not yet faded, and they happily communicated with each other. Then someone thanked Sonia for being willing to introduce Mr. Cassidon to them. There is no need to thank me. It was your piety that impressed Lord Cassidon and made him willing to come here. When Sonia heard this, she smiled slightly and said softly. On the contrary, she wanted to thank these people. After Mr. Cassidon learned about these people's plans, he decided to spend the New Year on Xandar. She was also unaware of the side that Mr. Cassidon had just revealed. All she knew was that Mr. Cassidon asked her to make the announcement within the allotted time. This time, Mr. Cassidon let the members of the Void cult know that his prayers and offerings were all seen. This is undoubtedly the best gift for many members of the Void cult. Your pious Lord Cassidon has felt it. So you should just share the food you brought. This is Master Cassidon's instruction. Immediately, Sonia looked at the people who had not left yet and said. This was not a rumor from Sonia, but an instruction given to her by Mr. Cassidon when he knew that these people were not only planning to offer food, but also money. All she did was convey Mr. Cassidon's will. Thank you Lord Cassidon for your tolerance. Although Miss Sonia only mentioned the food and said nothing about the money, no one felt any dissatisfaction. Afterwards, Sonia also left. As for the money, it would not be too late to collect the money after the New Year. After a few days, Mr. Cassidon planned to leave, and it seemed that he would not be gone for a short time. Therefore, Sonia also hopes to see Mr. Cassidy's true self as much as possible instead of communicating through the cosmic communicator. After knowing that all these foods were edible, many members also began to share the food. Then they dispersed into small groups one by one. Tony, Renly, Kyle, Predictor, and Lacey gathered together to chat. Renly asked about Tony and his hometown C53. Tony naturally also introduced Blue Star, saying that the environment was similar to Xandar, but the technology was not as advanced as Xandar. It introduced the characteristics of each country in Blue Star, but mainly mentioned several big countries in Blue Star, such as the United States and China. Blue Star is divided into different countries, not the united community. Lacey was a little surprised when she heard Tony's introduction. Now Blue Star's technology is still far away from realizing free space navigation, so we have to worry about our own three-quarter territory. But when it comes to entertainment, Blue Star's development is quite high. It's higher than Xandar, so there's a lot of fun. Tony also knew what surprised Lacey. All advanced civilization planets in the universe were basically united communities, but he also knew that it would not be easy to change in a short time, so he said with a smile. Is it more entertaining? If I have time, I'll go there and have a look. The people from Blue Star won't suddenly attack me then, right? Lacey also became interested after hearing this and said jokingly. No, Lacey, your appearance is not far different from that of humans from Blue Star. Even if you blend directly into the crowd, no one may doubt you. When Tony heard Lacey say she wanted to go to Blue Star, it could be said that she agreed with both hands and feet. By then, Lacey was unfamiliar with the place and would definitely come to him to stay. Now that they have all been borrowed, if there is any trouble, it is not easy to ask Lacey to take action. Are they similar to the people from Xandar? Then it shouldn't be a problem if I go. Kyle was also a little moved when he heard this. You still have Renly to go to. As long as there is no trouble, there will be no problem. Tony nodded when he heard this. Kyle was more than 2 meters tall and looked like a big man. However, Blue Star is either not taller than 2 meters tall, or not as strong as Kyle. So that means there will be a problem if I go. Seeing that Tony didn't mention his name, the Predictor spoke. There's nothing wrong with you, it's just that your dress is a little bit more fashionable in Blue Star. But even if you don't change, you will be treated as a cosplayer at best. Tony looked at the prophet's appearance, which was covered in bandages and couldn't see clearly, and spoke more tactfully. I understand, you have to go back for a while this time. If you encounter any trouble and need our help, you can contact us. We will rush over to help when the time comes. The prophet heard the words and understood them, and spoke. Even if I don't need your help, I still welcome you to visit Blue Star. As the host, I will take you to enjoy Blue Star's entertainment. Tony said with a smile when he heard the prophet's words. Okay, when we go to talk, we will inform you in advance. Kyle heard this and said loudly with a smile. Various small groups also gathered together to eat delicious food and chat about the future. In Harvey's villa, Sonia left the temple, and when she returned to the villa, she found that Mr. Cassidy had returned and the table was already filled with food. You should also sit down and eat together. Harvey saw Sonia's surprised look and said. Thank you, Mr. Cassidy, for the invitation. But it's not polite for me to sit at the same table with you. Sonia felt a little moved when she heard this, but her reason still prevailed and she declined with a smile. In the past, I spent a lot of time alone. During the new year, I just added some meals for myself. Other than that, it's not much different from usual. This time I want to celebrate the new year here because I know you are here. So on this New Year's Day, don't worry about that. Let's sit down and eat together. When Harvey saw Sonia's refusal, he didn't care and said, When Sonia heard Mr. Cassidy's words, some blush appeared on her beautiful face and she nodded. Then she went to sit next to Mr. Cassidy instead of sitting directly across the table. Sitting in this position indicates that you are of lower status than the owner of the table. Sonia, you have helped me a lot over the past year. I will trouble you to continue to look after Void Island in the future. Harvey's eyes flashed when he saw that Sonia did not choose to sit directly opposite. The initial salary he paid Sonia was only 500,000 yuan a year, but Sonia did a good job in taking care of daily chores and kept him lazy. Busy and busy, he is responsible for managing various matters on the island, which has far exceeded the role of his initial salary of 500,000 yuan. So Harvey can only reward Sonia with a lot of money from time to time. Even if you don't tell me, Mr. Cassidy, I will do this. When Sonia heard these words, she also picked up the wine glass and said with a smile. Harvey and Sonia showed a harmonious scene, and the various small groups on Void Island also looked harmonious together. Even the chef who was responsible for making a large amount of food today, after finishing the food, got together to cook some side dishes and had a few drinks together during their free time. They planned to go back to visit their parents after finishing these days. And all this comes down to the sense of identity with Void Island. On the first day of the new year, everyone brags about eating, drinking and having fun until the evening. The members of the Void God cult on Void Island all took it upon themselves to clean up all the garbage they made, and then went to find a place to sleep and rest. Sir, you haven't participated in such a lively event for a long time. And we saw something so spectacular. After Tony had eaten and drank enough, he heard Jarvis's voice when he returned to the laboratory. Well, luckily I didn't leave or I would have missed it. But now it's time to prepare for the return journey. Let's talk about the rest of the journey. Pepper is probably impatient to wait for me, Tony said with a smile when he heard Jarvis's words. Miss Pepper is a strong woman. Although she complained to you, she did not stop your decision to stay here for a longer time. Jarvis heard this and spoke. Of course I know, but that's why I want to go back and surprise her. Tony was in a great mood. After returning to the laboratory, he stepped directly onto the space fighter outside the laboratory. Then, driven by Jarvis, it soared through the clouds and into space, embarking on the return journey. He didn't care about Harvey. If Harvey wanted to, he could keep going back and forth between Xandar and Blue Star. But Tony wanted to see with his own eyes what kind of trouble Harvey told him would haunt him. Harvey stayed here for 2 more days. After Harvey said something to Sonia, and Sonia waved goodbye, Harvey left directly in one step and embarked on the road back to Blue Star. Harvey also returned to his manor in Blue Star after a year. After staying for a year on the Void Island where Xandar was extremely busy every day, Harvey, who had just returned, looked at the somewhat deserted home and felt a little unaccustomed to it. Turn on the lights. But he had already made a decision before and couldn't be so lazy anymore, so Harvey said it directly, and the lights were brightly lit in the manor. Afterwards, Harvey took off Cassidon's armor and changed into a new set of clothes. Although it was a bit deserted in Blue Star's home, Harvey felt another kind of relaxation without having to maintain Cassidon's identity. Harvey has been in the game for the first time in a long time. After it went online, Harvey also received a lot of emails, all from the official. The official operator saw that he had not been online for too long, and mistakenly thought that some game features did not meet his wishes, so he gave up the game. He sent not only 1 email, but 8 in total. Harvey is quite Buddhist when it comes to playing games, not to mention that this is just a game about raising pets, so there is no reason to be dissatisfied. However, gaming is one of Harvey's few pastimes in Blue Star, and it is normal to spend some money on this pastime. So Harvey took a look at the updates, followed the version and learned what Krypton gold items and mythical beast pets there were, and then started to earn gold directly. I bought more than 90 copies of all the newly released useful Krypton gold props, and also bought a lot of cultivation stones to start strengthening them. Then the ids of Buddhist players began to make announcements all over the server. Didn't this big guy quit the trap? Isn't it true? We haven't seen him for at least a year, right? Who is this boss? This game is truly a god. When he makes money, no one else has anything to do with him. Don't blink your eyes at Krypton money. There is too much money and no place to spend it. Isn't it good to use it to pick up girls? Is it possible that you just pick up too many girls, so you want to find some entertainment in the game? Is it possible it's a trap? Impossible. This ID is the strongest Kryptonian in every game. Comparing people to each other really makes people mad. Tomorrow is Christmas, and except for restaurants and hotels, most people are at home for the holidays. Plus the game has a Christmas event, so a lot of people are online on the game. So many people are looking at this godly guy whose ID is a Buddhist player and constantly strengthening his skills. Harvey's return even attracted the attention of game operators, because some achievements, such as advancing 30 times, were originally only the upper limit they set. I never thought anyone could achieve it, but it turned out to be triggered by someone today. It was proved that there was a Krypton money boss, and after asking, I found out that the player ID was a Buddhist player, and I could say I was relieved. This player, the Buddhist player, is known as a super boss who can run a game by himself. When the big boss suddenly stopped going online for several months, they panicked and wanted to find out what caused the big boss's dissatisfaction. But no matter how hard I contacted, I couldn't get in touch. I had given up all hope, thinking that the boss had really decided to quit. Unexpectedly, the boss suddenly returned and started making money. It looks like I can have a good year today. The game operator expressed emotion as he watched the number of Krypton gold keep rising. When Harvey was strengthening his Krypton gold, he also ordered a lot of fast food, and occasionally he wanted to try these fried things. The menu he ate on Xandar was all decided by Sonia, informed by the chef and then made, so he didn't need to worry about it at all. Life is comfortable, but there is no food like fried chicken and burgers. Now that Harvey is back at Blue Star, how can he not enjoy himself and order a large amount of compost home happy water? Harvey's enhancements were enhanced from morning to evening. He used money to directly ignore the problem of enhancement probability and made all his pets to the strongest level. Harvey did his usual routine, then looked at the cute pets before going offline. For various online games, Krypton Gold is equivalent to opening a physical plugin. As long as Krypton Gold is used, one can reach the strongest level, sweep through various dungeons, and gain the highest income from completing various tasks. And at 10 o'clock in the evening on December 23rd, a space fighter plane with anti-reconnaissance capabilities landed in Stark's Manor. The arrival of this space fighter attracted the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D. The fact that Tony Stark has been missing for a whole year has long been recorded in S.H.I.E.L.D. Asking Tony Stark's secretary Pepper, he got no response. He only knew that Tony Stark was not in any danger to his life. So they paid close attention to the situation around Stark Manor. They watched the arrival of this spaceship, which clearly surpassed Blue Star's technology by countless generations. Nick Fury's eyes became profound. Where on earth did Mr. Tony Stark get this spaceship? Coulson looked at this spaceship that he had never seen before, his eyes full of shock. Although I didn't see Tony Stark walking out of it, since I landed at Stark Manor as soon as I arrived at Blue Star, it must have something to do with Tony Stark. That's why Coulson felt weird. Although S.H.I.E.L.D. is also researching spaceships, we must know that S.H.I.E.L.D. has collected many materials and technologies on the Blue Star that are inaccessible to ordinary people, so that it can conduct research many years in advance. And even if they are researching, they have spent countless money and manpower, and now there are still some problems that are bothering them. As a result, after Tony Stark disappeared for a year, he suddenly returned and brought a high-tech gadget that looked particularly like a spaceship. Do you want to ask? Black Widow Natasha saw the high technology of the spaceship and looked at Nick Fury. Let Coulson find out. I received word that Harvey Ambalaka has returned this morning. I don't know how long it will take before I leave. Harvey doesn't like me or you very well. He has a slightly better impression of Coulson. Nick Fury heard Natasha's offer and said, if I were to ask, my opinion would be to wait until at least the new year. Tony Stark just came back after disappearing for a year. He must have wanted to relax at first. Now that this opportunity has passed, I'm afraid it will disturb Tony Stark's interest and he won't look good on me. Coulson heard that it was up to him to go and expressed his opinion. Just take care of these. If Tony Stark is unwilling to cooperate and tell some information, try to use soft methods. There is really no other way and we cannot use strong methods. Tony Stark is now a member of the Avengers. Even if he is unwilling to cooperate fully with our S.H.I.E.L.D. and provide various advanced technologies, as long as the relationship between us does not break down, he will still contribute. And his friend is the devil Harvey Ambalaka. We can no longer take risks to provoke him. Nick Fury heard this and said, yes. Coulson nodded and agreed. And just as Coulson thought, Tony just wants to give Pepper a surprise and spend some time with Pepper. When the space fighter landed, the hatch opened and a figure wearing a gold and red steel armor walked out. Tony, didn't you say you wanted to stay there longer? Pepper saw Tony's arrival, Her eyes were full of happiness, but there were some doubts in her heart. In order to come back and spend Christmas with you, I stayed up all night studying and made a lot of preparations. Even if I don't have to take care of it now, there will still be Miss Sonia over there who won't help expand the industry, so I came back early. Tony immediately picked up Pepper and said with a smile, "Who is Miss Sonia?" Pepper was originally very happy to see Tony back, but when she heard a woman's name, she immediately asked, "Even if you give me 100 courages, I won't dare to miss her." "Miss Sonia is Harvey's housekeeper. It's not right to talk here. Let's talk after we go in." Tony saw Pepper looking a little jealous, carried Pepper into the villa, and explained, "Is it true? Mr. Harvey also found a butler. That woman is beautiful." Pepper was also a little shocked when she heard that Mr. Harvey actually found a butler. She often contacted Tony, but when she did so, Tony was always tinkering with various things in the research room that she couldn't understand. Tony didn't tell her much about the rest of the universe. Miss Sonia must meet the second criteria of Harvey's mate selection. Beautiful and smart, and I can tell Miss Sonia has thoughts about Harvey. Harvey must know it himself, but I don't know why. Harvey has no further ideas. Tony also felt a little strange in his heart when he explained. Shy. Pepper heard these words and guessed. For me to believe Harvey would be shy, I'd rather believe the sky is falling. Can you imagine someone as powerful as Harvey, with ideas far beyond ordinary people, showing a shy side? Tony said immediately after hearing this. So it's just like you before, and you haven't had enough fun. After hearing this, Pepper imagined it for a moment, shook her head quickly, and then spoke. I've thought about it too, but according to Miss Sonia's character, there's also Harvey's identity and abilities. Harvey can find 180 wives without any problem, and his body can handle it. By the way, I forgot to tell you, Miss Sonia is also a member of the Void cult. Tony carried Pepper to the sofa and sat down, the two cuddled together and said, "What else could it be?" Pepper knew that Mr. Harvey came from the unknown Void, so his feelings and values were obviously not bound by Blue Star's laws and morals. So there is no denying that Mr. Harvey has the ability to find 180 partners. Forget it, let's not talk about these things for now. When Tony let Pepper lean into his arms, he moved his hands up and down Pepper's beautiful body. Although the two of them were on the cosmic communicator, they would see each other from time to time. But they were separated for almost a year, and Harvey was staring at him over there. Don't let him find a beautiful secretary. If it weren't for the fact that there were many things to do on the island that distracted him, he would have been burning with desire. Now that he has returned to Blue Star and met Pepper, how could Tony still endure his desires? Take off your armor first. Pepper rolled her eyes at Tony and said angrily. By the way, I almost forgot. Jarvis too, recover the armor. Just back, Tony failed to install Jarvis, so he could only order Jarvis number 2. After recovering the armor, Tony immediately became warm to Pepper. The two of them had a sleepless night and were happy with each other. Pepper leaned against Tony's thick shoulder. Tony, how long do you plan to stay in Blue Star this time? Pepper asked, looking up at Tony slightly. The original plan was to stay at least 3 months and spend time with you. If you don't want me to leave, I can promise you to postpone staying for more than half a year at most. But before I came back, Harvey told me that I might not be able to return to the universe for a while this time. It indicates that something may happen to Blue Star that will make me unable to escape. Tony didn't hide anything after hearing this and expressed his original thoughts. Are you going to get into trouble? Pepper didn't feel angry when she heard Tony's plan, but said a little worried. It's just speculation and it's not clear yet. Harvey will occasionally reveal a little bit, but not everything. So I won't know anything until it happens. But Harvey has returned to Blue Star. If there is really big trouble, just hide with Harvey. Although Harvey doesn't care much about Blue Star, if my life is in danger, I will hide from him. He will definitely help a group of people. At least his life safety is guaranteed. Tony wasn't too worried after hearing this, because his backer was also staying at Blue Star. As long as he doesn't take the initiative to cause trouble and takes charge of things, he won't be afraid even if Guyi comes. Well, I'll feel more at ease now that Mr. Harvey is also at Blue Star. Pepper also nodded when he heard this. In the following days, Tony completely put down all work and stayed with Pepper until January 1, 2011. Tony called Harvey directly, knowing that Harvey was at home alone, so he wanted to come over for a big dinner. Harvey didn't refuse after hearing this. He had been eating fast food every day these days, so he wanted to change the taste. In the year that Harvey left, Stark Industries paid another $1.8 billion dividend to Harvey. As Stark Industries has established a foothold in the energy industry, its share of profits is increasing every year. Harvey's current liquidity has reached more than $2 billion, so it can be said that he can just lie down and collect money. Harvey came directly to Tony's home, and Pepper just had someone prepare a sumptuous meal. "Happy New Year, Mr. Harvey. Tony will ask you to take more care of me in the new year." When Pepper saw Mr. Harvey coming, he bowed slightly and said politely. After the two had fun these days, Tony told her a lot about Xandar. We also know that Tony received a lot of funding from Mr. Harvey, otherwise the development of the gravity device would not have been so fast. And she also saw the video recorded by Jarvis, although it was not as real as seeing it live. But she also saw hundreds of people paying homage to Mr. Harvey. At the same time, Mr. Harvey's huge body of more than 200 meters high brought a great shock to Pepper's soul. "You don't have to be so polite, Miss Pepper. Tony's abilities are very strong and he doesn't need much care from me. On the contrary, his talents have brought me a lot of money. You don't have to worry about liquidity for the time being," Harvey said with a smile when he saw Pepper being so polite. "Thank you no matter what, for giving Tony the opportunity to set foot in the universe." When Pepper heard this, she knew that these were kind words from Mr. Harvey, so she said gratefully, "Pepper, go get the other food first." Tony saw Pepper like this and said directly, quote. When Pepper heard these words, she glanced at Tony and found that Tony's face was serious, so she nodded. "Sorry, Harvey made you laugh. Pepper wouldn't be like this in the first place. It's all because I talked about the New Year's pilgrimage to Xandar before. After I showed her the video, she became like this. If I have offended you, please forgive me." While Pepper was leaving, Tony came to Harvey and said a little embarrassedly, "Miss Pepper has never been a fool, and she has never left Blue Star to see a broader world, so she can understand. You don't need to worry about me being angry. After all, I've experienced more troublesome situations than this." Harvey didn't pay attention when he heard the words and spoke. On Xandar, he could leave whenever he wanted, such as returning to Blue Star this time. Sonia wouldn't make any comments at all. This time she would ask herself when she would come back, which was an exception. But if Harvey wants to take a walk on the island, Sonia will take it very seriously and constantly remind him to pay attention to his behavior. Even if Sonia is away for some time, even just for half a day, she will still feel worried. "No wonder you said you wanted to go back to Blue Star to have some fun. It's free over there, but not completely free, right?" Tony heard Harvey's words, thought for a moment, and understood. On Void Island, he had a good relationship with many members of the Void cult, but not many of them were lucky enough to meet Harvey. Obviously Cassidon's identity requires Harvey to pay attention to his behavior. "Yes, I eat well, drink well and sleep well on Xandar, but in terms of freedom, Harvey is more comfortable as a person." Harvey was not polite at Tony's house and sat directly in the seat in front of the dining table. "I feel more at home on Xandar. Because there you don't need to hide your younger identity, and you can still show your strength to your heart's content," Tony said with some emotion after hearing this. In Blue Star, he must wear steel armor before going out. He must not take it off outside. Once he takes it off, his clothes will be exposed. "Tony, you just came back a few days ago. Even if you want to go to the universe, you will have to stay at home for at least half a year." Pepper came up with the food at this time, heard Tony's words, and spoke. "I know, you don't have to be so nervous. I may have to leave for a longer time." Tony was not afraid when he heard this and spoke. "Tony, if you want to see me for anything, just tell me. I don't like other people to twist around in front of me." When Harvey saw Tony like this, he didn't stop moving his hands and said directly, "Okay, I just wanted to ask what kind of trouble I'm going to have this year. I know the secret must not be revealed, but you can always tell me a general direction, right? Otherwise I won't be able to sleep well." Tony realized that Harvey was aware of his intentions and stopped beating around the bush, asking him what he had been thinking about and struggling with over the past few days. What's the general direction? It's related to the Avengers. Harvey knew that Tony would look for him if nothing happened, but he looked up at Tony and gave him some direction. Is there an invasion from a foreign enemy? When Tony heard Harvey mention the Avengers, he frowned and said, he is currently the only one in the Avengers, but he also knows the conditions for the Avengers to attack. That is, there is a foreign enemy threatening Blue Star. As for the battle between countries, Nick Fury cannot ask him. Whether it counts as a foreign enemy depends on how you define it. Harvey thought for a moment after hearing this, stopped what he was doing, thought for a moment, and spoke. Blue Star is said to belong to Asgard's territory. Although Loki is adopted, he is also the Prince of Asgard. But after Loki, he will indeed come with Thanos' army. So Harvey didn't know whether it was better to describe it as civil strife, or whether it was more appropriate to describe it as invasion by foreign enemies. Wouldn't God King Odin or Supreme Mage Ancient One take care of this matter? Tony's face became serious when he heard Harvey's words. Won't. Harvey can give a positive answer to this question. Odin was deceived by Loki, and Yi saw that it was difficult to intervene even if Thor was willing to intervene, so he let Loki have so much fun. Then I can handle it. When Tony heard that the two big shots would not be alarmed and knew that the foreign enemies were not that strong this time, his expression softened and he said with a relaxed look, if nothing else, you can solve it now. Harvey did not deny it after hearing this. Loki will become stronger only after he has delved into countless magics when he grows old. However, the strength of Loki that we are about to see at this stage is relatively stronger physically. You can play with some heroes, but when it comes to really strong ones, Loki's strength isn't enough. But Thor is different. Normally, Thor's strength is okay, but once Thor turns on the father missing mode, his strength will soar to a very ridiculous level. Okay, I will pay close attention to the news from around the world. If the other party comes by then, I will go and take a look. Tony was completely relieved to hear this. He didn't ask Harvey where the other party would appear at that time. As long as aliens appear, he will never show mercy if they are definitely enemies. Quote. Harvey was thoughtful when he heard Tony say that he would pay close attention to the news in various places. The God of Thunder who has temporarily lost the power of the God of Thunder will not be able to harm Blue Star. Even if the God of Thunder has the power of the God of Thunder, he will not harm Blue Star. Tony should not regard him as an opponent. Tony would at most deal with Loki, so Harvey didn't bother to say anything. Both Tony and Pepper felt at ease knowing that the trouble was not threatening their lives. So Pepper also served the table with peace of mind, and the three of them started eating together, talking and laughing. After lunch, Harvey went home. Instead of watching Tony and Pepper make out, he might as well go for a drive and pick up girls. Harvey only remembers 2011 as the year when Captain America woke up and Thor arrived. But to be honest, Harvey didn't know the specific month. But it's only for a few months at most, just wait for the show to start. Harvey drives a luxury car and drives down the road, but even during the Chinese New Year. New York in the United States also has simple folk customs, and some black people may engage in $0 shopping incidents or fights with guns. However, those who work in New York, as long as they are not new to the industry, will know how to get out of the way when they see Harvey's luxury car and license plate. They are prone to get angry and take action directly, even fighting for their dignity, but it is impossible for them to risk their lives for the sake of their dignity. Before Harvey met Tony Stark, New York's richest man, he often drove around. There has been no danger for several years, so it is definitely not a good thing. Not to mention that Harvey, a young rich man, has a close relationship with Tony Stark, the former arms tycoon and head of Stark Industries, and often visits Stark Manor. This kind of thing has long spread throughout the streets and alleys of New York. Even though Tony Stark has now switched to energy, a skinny camel is bigger than a horse. Even if we don't talk about Tony Stark's identity and abilities as Iron Man, who is regarded as a hero by countless people, everyone in New York knows about Tony Stark's relationship with the military. The little gangsters who have been around for several years and are still alive, who are not human beings, can just show off in front of ordinary people. For some big guys in New York, it is impossible to touch them. Some underground forces and gangs in New York learned that New York tycoon Harvey had escaped again after a year, so they restrained themselves a little to avoid their pistols going off. Not to mention beating Harvey to death. Even if he just scratched Harvey's car, if he didn't have the money to pay back, he would have to pay for it with his life. As for the circle of New York celebrities and young women, they heard that Harvey was driving outside, so they all dressed up and went out together on the street. You must know that Harvey's net worth is now more than $8 billion US. They are earning billions in dividends every year. These are no longer young and promising people, but real winners. At present, Harvey is not married yet, and he looks very handsome. If he takes the initiative to send it to him, he will not get the reputation of a mistress. Naturally, Harvey became the star attraction in the eyes of countless beauties in New York. As for Harvey being Asian, that is not a problem at all. As long as you are rich and generous, let alone Asian, even if you are black, it is not a problem. Harvey originally just came out for a ride to see if there were any beauties, but he found that on this January 1st, a day when many people in the United States did not return to work, there were so many beauties on the road, and all of them were beautifully dressed and ogling him. Harvey was not interested at all. Harvey does not reject makeup. Appropriate makeup can make women show a more beautiful side. However, he can only accept that after applying makeup, he can still see the original beauty of a pure natural beauty. As for those women who look like different women before and after makeup, then makeup should no longer be called decoration. And Harvey is also very particular about cleanliness. Compared to a woman with a little bit of red lips that thousands of people can taste, even if she is called a beauty by countless people, it is impossible for her to pass him. Harvey prefers clean, all-natural beauties. It is almost impossible to find an all-natural beauty who still retains her first appearance in adulthood in the United States. He only cares about his kidneys and not his heart, so he doesn't require it to be the first time, but women can't have too much experience. It is also for these reasons that Harvey is very selective in choosing beautiful women. But the one he chooses will definitely be the one in a million beauty. Harvey is not a famous pile driver in New York like Tony, who just plays with what he likes. He had plenty of time, so he was not in a hurry and drove his convertible around New York. As night fell, Harvey walked around in circles, stopping by the roadside from time to time, waiting for beautiful women to take the initiative to strike up a conversation. Just when Harvey thought he had nothing to gain and was about to go home, a tall brown-haired lady with a beautiful appearance and a cold temperament looked around in the distance, and her eyes lit up when she saw her car. Then he ran all the way and hurriedly came to Harvey's car. This woman's dress is not very coquettish, but rather simple. She is wearing a black short skirt and professional attire, and her voluptuous figure can be seen with her bulging front and back. Are you Harvey Ambalaka, a famous young rich man in New York? The woman looked at Harvey and hesitated before asking. Harvey raised his head and glanced at this woman, and found that she was considered a beauty. The source of life was also complete, which meant that she was still perfect. I am, but you are not to my taste, so I advise you to stop thinking so much and go home. But unfortunately, he could tell that this woman deliberately put on makeup to look more mature and slim, and even her clothes might have been borrowed, so Harvey asked her to leave directly. I heard that after sleeping with you, I can get a lot of money. I'm short of money right now, so please give me a chance. Please take another look to see if I meet your vision. After the woman saw that this handsome man was indeed Harvey, she bit her red lips gently when she heard Harvey's words, with some pleading in her words. My ears are getting calloused when I hear this reason. I'm short of money. If you are short of money, you can earn it, borrow it, or choose a rich man you think you can afford to support you. Although you don't suit my taste, but based on your appearance and youth, I think there should be many men willing to support you. Harvey saw the pitiful appearance of this young woman and didn't know whether she was real or pretending, so he spoke. He has a lot of money, and if he finds someone who suits his vision, he is indeed willing to pay a lot of money to completely break off the relationship after sleeping with her for one night. But the prerequisite for him to give money is that he actively wants to do it. As for wanting him to pay for some weird reasons or moral kidnapping, that's impossible. Please, I have to raise $100,000 in 3 days to save my life. But now that banks are on holiday, even if you want to mortgage your house to get money, you can't do it. I can find other people to support me and collect the 100,000. But I asked about some things about the rich people in New York. I'm not sure whether they will really cut off contact with me after the time agreed with them. I don't want to ruin the rest of my life for $100,000. I found out that you keep your promise, and after spending the evening with you, you will take the initiative to spend millions of dollars to sever the relationship. I don't need that much money, as long as you are willing to give me $100,000. As long as you are willing to give it and let me take it and pay the money, I can do it for a day, not to mention a month. As long as you don't come to me again afterwards, I can guarantee that I will never come to pester you again, please. When the young woman heard Harvey's words, she reached out and grabbed Harvey's hand on the car window, her eyes and words full of pleading. Get in the car. Harvey heard what the woman said and saw that the woman was so anxious that she shed tears. He thought about it for a while and spoke. After the woman heard this, she immediately got into the car obediently. Thank you very much. After getting in the car, the woman kept saying thank you. It was also because she found out that Harvey Ambalaka was a young rich man who would take the initiative to cut off the relationship after a night of lovemaking, so there was no need to worry about causing her unresolved trouble later. That's why she came here with high hopes to give it a try, hoping to get some life-saving money without ruining the rest of her life. Let me tell you the rules. This matter is between you and me. I will give you the money that should be given to you, but don't come to me again afterwards. I also don't want to hear you use my name in the future to publicize that I had a relationship with you. Understand? Harvey was so happy that he cried when he saw the woman, and he said it without any nonsense. I understand. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. The woman nodded repeatedly after hearing this. Seeing her like this, Harvey took the woman back to his manor. The two of them spent the whole night in a tormented mood until morning. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the woman woke up leisurely. She felt some pain, but when she saw the piles of US dollars on the table, adding up to a total of 500,000, the pain subsided a lot. She got out of bed and came to the table, and found a note next to the money, asking her to take the money and leave, and not to disturb her again. Obviously, even if she does not fully meet Mr. Harvey's criteria for selecting a woman, since Mr. Harvey has agreed, he will still give her a lot of money. However, after the woman saw the content on the note, she first put on her own clothes to cover up the traces of the night. She looked at the amount of money on the table, picked up a sum on the side, wrote a note to express her gratitude, and left the manor with 100,000, enduring the weakness and pain in her legs. Since Mr. Harvey Ambalaka kept his promise, she naturally could not break the contract. 100,000 as promised was enough. Harvey stood in the room and watched through the window as the woman left. Harvey saw the note thanking him for his help and saying he was a good guy, so he sent him a good guy card. This $500,000 is actually Harvey's test. If this woman only takes 100,000 yuan away, it means that she is really just here for life-saving money. If he planned to take them all away, Harvey would have to torment this woman for a month. Even if she was left hanging there, she would still have to be kept nearby. But now it was confirmed that the other party really just wanted life-saving money, so Harvey didn't care about it anymore. Harvey casually released void energy and directly evaporated the good guy card. I made a call and asked the housekeeping cleaning company to send someone to clean it, while I went straight to playing games. If he couldn't find it yesterday, he would go out for a ride today to have fun. But since he found it yesterday, he will rest for some time and talk about it later if he is interested. To put it bluntly, picking up girls was just a pastime that Harvey occasionally did when he was bored at home. More than 4 months have passed without realizing it. During these 4 months, Harvey occasionally went out, but for some reason, more beautiful women came to him for help. Faced with these women who came to his door, Harvey found that some of them were really in urgent need of life-saving money, and some of them were pretty. He was kind and helpful after spending the evening together. It was obvious at a glance that Harvey was just pretending and was too lazy to respond. But on this day, when Harvey went out to find food, while passing by a park, I saw the young woman who had begged him a few months ago and stopped the car. However, at this time, this young woman no longer deliberately dressed up like a royal sister to take the hot route, but put on makeup to look more youthful and natural. But even if the makeup changed, the source of life would not change easily, so Harvey recognized it directly. If this woman had approached him with this face, he would have agreed directly. Now this young brown-haired woman is pushing a middle-aged woman's wheelchair out of the park and walking slowly. After the brown-haired young woman discovered Harvey, her eyes did not dodge and a smile appeared on her face. After seeing this, Harvey nodded slightly, started the car, stepped on the accelerator and drove away. Since it was agreed, the clouds and rain that night should be regarded as a memory of each other. "Daughter, do you know that handsome guy?" The old woman who was pushed by the brown-haired lady suddenly smiled when she saw her daughter. She looked at Harvey leaving and asked with some concern. "Mr. Harvey Ambalaka, a famous young, handsome and wealthy man in New York, a gentleman who keeps his promises. He's well known among New York women's circles." "Of course I know him, but he doesn't know me." The woman saw her mother asking this and said with a smile, "It turns out it's him. I asked him how he is so good looking and can drive such a good sports car. It is true that he is handsome and rich, but it is hard to say whether he is a gentleman or not. Don't be fooled by those false rumors. Even if you get to know that kind of man, you won't be able to control him. You are still young now, so work diligently and wait for a few years before you think about marriage." The woman's mother looked at her daughter after hearing this and said earnestly, "Mom, I know," the young woman said obediently after hearing her mother's instructions. Although Harvey drove away, he was not far away, so he heard the young woman praising him. No wonder he always felt that more and more young and beautiful women were coming to his door for help recently. Maybe it was because of this woman. "I just said good things about him and didn't say I had a relationship with him, so it didn't count as a breach of contract. But that's fine." A random act of kindness made it easier for him to choose a beautiful woman who suits his taste. After Harvey learned the reason, his mood improved a lot. He suddenly wanted to eat, so he turned the car around and went to Chinatown to find something to eat. Life on Blue Star was undoubtedly happy, and after S.H.I.E.L.D. knew his identity, they did not dare to appear in front of him. It makes Harvey play more carefree. He doesn't need to think about money, and he doesn't need to always pay attention to his own behavior. He just needs to think about where to find things for fun every day. For people in the mercenary world, the mercenary codenamed Death has disappeared for almost 2 years. Therefore, there are some rumors. Some people think that the god of death has overturned, but more people think that the god of death has made enough money and retired. After all, Death made more than 1 billion in just a few years of his mercenary career. As long as you don't spend too much money, you can basically spend your life freely. If you use that money well, you can achieve complete financial freedom. However, the retirement of Death can be said to be good news for the mercenary world, because without Death, they can take on a lot more orders. As for the dark side of Blue Star, who is the happiest among the guys who specialize in doing things in the dark? That is undoubtedly the boss code named Zero, who specializes in helping people launder money. The handling fees charged by other mercenaries for laundering money from him are very high because he has the money to hire people to protect him. When he first helped the god of death launder money, he didn't realize that he also charged normal high fees. But the terrifying power shown by the god of death made him dare not charge more. Every time he asked him to help launder money, not to mention making money, he would pay a lot of money every time. It is undoubtedly a great blessing for him that the god of death has retired. Now he is the only one who knows that the guy codenamed Death is currently looking for something to do in New York. He just knew that even if he was given 100 courages, he would not dare to reveal his identity as the god of death. But if he is in trouble, according to the good deeds he left behind, even if Death retires and no longer has an account on the dark web, no one can find Death. He can also find the true identity of the god of death, Harvey, and pay a big price to let Harvey help him solve some troubles. With this trump card, at least until he dies of old age in the next 60 years, he shouldn't need to be too afraid of provoking unsolvable troubles and opponents. Harvey can play everywhere, but Tony is busy researching nanotechnology every day. Previously, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Coulson came to visit. Although Coulson's attitude was very friendly, Tony did not agree. Instead, he directly told S.H.I.E.L.D. not to worry about the space fighter. Regarding space fighters and various technologies, it is impossible for him to provide them. If S.H.I.E.L.D. gets control of the space fighter, it will be equivalent to the United Nations Council getting the space fighter. If countless talents are allowed to study the samples, they may not be able to perfectly produce an identical space fighter, but they will definitely produce a more advanced fighter. A more advanced defense system will also be developed incidentally, which will disrupt the weak balance between the major powers of Blue Star and may cause another world war to break out in Blue Star. His goal is to bring all mankind on Blue Star into the interstellar era. If it triggers a world war and returns to the Stone Age, wouldn't everything be over? If a world war breaks out, he can seek refuge with Harvey, and he will indeed die. But if Blue Star returns to the Stone Age during the battle, even if Harvey takes action to protect him and Pepper, to save them, he had invited Renly and others to visit Blue Star in the future. If Renly and others had really come as guests in recent years, the scene they saw would be different from what he said at the beginning. Tony feels embarrassed just thinking about it, so no matter what S.H.I.E.L.D. says, Tony can't possibly share all the advanced technologies he has mastered in the extraterrestrial bloodbath with S.H.I.E.L.D. In addition to spending time with Pepper at night, Tony studies nanotechnology. If nanotechnology is developed, the various functions of the steel armor can be further improved, and its strength can be comprehensively enhanced to deal with various enemies and situations, allowing him to reduce the chance of exposing his true body with a greater probability. Of course, Tony also knew that Harvey had been living an extremely carefree life in Blue Star these past few months, and he could pick up girls whenever he wanted. As a well-known romantic figure in New York, Tony certainly wanted to be like Harvey. But even if Pepper didn't agree with it, he didn't dare to reveal that he had become younger in Blue Star, so don't mention how depressed he was. If he could, he wished he could go to Xandar Star to pick up girls right now. This is all due to the guy who is planning to invade Blue Star at some point this year. If there weren't those guys, he only had to stay in Blue Star for another 2 months, and if he stayed for half a year, he could convince Pepper to run to the universe and have a romantic relationship. So Tony asked Jarvis to observe the skies of various countries 24 hours a day. The opponent is an alien. Even if they have high-tech space fighters or warships, there will always be some clues if they want to invade Blue Star. As long as he is discovered, he will attack immediately. He wants to see which guys are so stupid, and he wants to invade Blue Star without asking about the big shots in Blue Star. In the 2 years since he joined Void, Tony has become much more low-key. After leaving the Blue Stars for a year, Pepper covered the past perfectly. However, Tony occasionally goes out when he lives in seclusion. Also on this day, while Tony was flying at low altitude wearing a steel suit, he suddenly received a warning from Jarvis that someone was planning to attack him. This caused Tony to fly directly into the air, and an electric whip was thrown directly over Tony's previous position. Tony was floating in the air and saw a man wearing a strange device, with a reactor on his chest that looked like an arc, holding an electric whip, and with disheveled hair that looked a little miserable, glaring at him. Jarvis, who is this guy? When Tony saw the other party attacking him for no reason, he did not fight back immediately but asked Jarvis directly. Under scanning, Ivan Vanko, son of traitor Anton Vanko. In less than 10 seconds, Jarvis searched for countless information and found this person's identity. Traitor, he has a grudge against me. Tony was a little confused when he heard Jarvis's words. His father is Anton Vanko, a former Soviet nuclear physicist who worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. and worked with your father, Howard Stark. Micro-arc reactors were studied together. This is the only information that can be found. As for whether this Ivan Vanki is your enemy, you need to make your own judgment. After hearing this, Jarvis projected some pictures in front of Tony's eyes and reported. Now as long as Jarvis thinks about it, anything on Blue Star that can be invaded through the internet cannot escape its eyes. Tony Stark, get down here. Ivan Vanko stood at the window of a building, looking at Tony Stark floating in the air, his eyes full of hatred and anger. Was the scene of him actively attacking me recorded? Tony ignored Ivan Vanko and asked Jarvis. Sir, all your actions are under surveillance. Jarvis heard this question and knew what Mr. Tony was thinking. Show it to me. Tony heard this and spoke. Then Tony saw that Ivan Vanki was indeed aiming at his chest. If he were hit by the charged electric whip, the steel armor might temporarily short-circuit, and he would fall directly into the downtown area below. He is fine, but he will inevitably cause some casualties. After learning all this and determining whether this person was friend or foe, Tony's eyes turned cold. This person just attacked him, but he didn't fight back immediately because he couldn't determine the other person's identity and intentions. Now it's certain that Tony won't talk nonsense. He had known each other for so long, the bounty hunters from Renly who had been involved in various battles all year round, and Tony had naturally learned a lot. According to Renly, if someone attacks you, the first step is to confirm the identity of the other person. If it is found that they are really an enemy. If killing him won't cause any trouble, then there's no need to show mercy. There is a saying that has been circulating on the battlefield for a long time: being kind to the enemy is cruel to yourself. Only if the enemy has a high status and will cause countless troubles if killed, then you should consider letting the opponent go and retreat directly. Ivan Vanko's identity naturally does not come from a strong background. However, if we attack directly in New York, it is easy to cause some damage. So the jet under Tony's feet erupted, instantly grabbing Ivan Vanko and flying directly into the sky, leaving the city. What do you want, Tony Stark? Ivan Vanko was caught by the link of the simple armor he made, and was taken high into the sky, speaking loudly. Seeing as you wanted to kill me with that whip just now, I naturally have to treat you in the same way. Tony took Ivan Vanko to fly to an altitude of 10,000 meters, which caused Ivan Vanko to be frozen by the cold at high altitude, and frost began to form all over his body. Spare me, I just wanted to test whether the name Iron Man is really that powerful. I didn't want to kill you. This made Ivan Vanko feel that death was approaching, and he began to beg for mercy out of fear. If Tony Stark killed him in New York, then even if he died, Tony Stark would definitely have to bear some infamy. Even if it doesn't ruin Tony Stark's reputation, it can still cause Tony Stark to be embarrassed. But Tony Stark took him away from New York, where ordinary people couldn't see him. Then someone mentioned later that with Tony Stark's relationship with the military, it would be easy to completely cover up his death. He was not afraid of death, but regretted that he could not bring Tony Stark down. Late, Tony heard Ivan Vanko's words and said coldly. Then the thrusters of Tony's steel suit burst into flames, accelerated, and a sonic boom appeared in the air. Without the protection of the steel armor, Ivankov's body was directly rolled into mud by the terrifying cyclone stirred up by the sonic boom. Then Tony fired a palm cannon and turned everything into ashes. After dealing with all this, Tony flew towards New York. This was just a small episode. Tony returned home. Harvey saw Ivan Vanko killed directly by Tony. Knowing that the follow-up plan of the guy who wanted to use Ivan Vanko's wisdom to create an army similar to steel armor, and who wanted to compete with Stark Industries and target Tony, could not be implemented. Originally, according to time, Thor, the god of thunder, was just in time. After Tony solved the trouble, Thor arrived. Although the plan has been disrupted now, since Ivan Vanko has appeared, it also indicates that Thor and Captain America will appear in the near future. Immediately, Harvey withdrew his gaze, thoughtfully. Before doing this, even if Ivan Vanko almost killed Tony, the most Tony could do was send Ivan Vanko to prison. But now that Tony found out that the other party seemed to want to kill him, he didn't hold back at all. After Tony joined the Void, his behavior undoubtedly changed somewhat, becoming less kind and more decisive. But as long as Tony doesn't lose his mind and violate the rules of the Void cult, Harvey won't care whether Tony's style changes. Then, Harvey focused on the game in front of him. Although the Marvel world is very different from its predecessors, not much has changed in terms of games. Now in 2011, some new games have been released, giving Harvey a lot more entertainment. Many people in the United States did not discover that Tony had killed anyone, but S.H.I.E.L.D. monitored something. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury looked back and forth many times. Looking at Tony, who did not hesitate at all, he felt a little defensive. Originally, Tony was the son of Howard Stark, one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. As long as Tony understands it, his relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D. will be closer. As long as the two didn't go too far, Tony wouldn't be able to take action against S.H.I.E.L.D. But after Tony came into contact with Harvey, his personality changed somewhat. Although Tony initially agreed to join S.H.I.E.L.D., he signed an agreement. If the enemy is not a person with superpowers, or it is an urgent special event related to aliens, they couldn't take the initiative to ask Tony to help. They couldn't even step into Tony's manor without permission. If Tony finds out, then Tony will choose whether to quit the Avengers. It can be said that the dominant party is not in his hands, but in Tony's hands. Now that Tony is the leader, he has become more decisive in his actions, and they also have to consider how to get along with Tony in the future. But at this moment, a secret message was sent to Nick Fury's cell phone. Nick Fury's eyes narrowed when he saw the message on his phone. He felt more confident in his heart. He finally had a reliable combat force to use. After Tony returns home, he meets Pepper. "Tony, what did you do? Why do I smell blood?" When Pepper saw Tony coming back, her nose moved slightly and she asked strangely. "There was a madman who suddenly attacked me, so I took care of it." Tony didn't deliberately hide it when he heard this. "You are so low-key now, how can you still offend people?" Pepper heard a madman ask in confusion. "Jarvis, please explain to Pepper." After hearing this, Tony thought for a while and gave direct instructions. "Yes, sir. Miss Pepper, the father of the madman who attacked Mr. Ivan Vanko was once the enemy of Mr. Tony's father." Jarvis knew that Mr. Tony did not want Miss Pepper to mistakenly think that Mr. Tony was killing innocent people indiscriminately. So Jarvis directly released a bunch of information, as well as the video of Ivan Vanko's first attack, explaining the ins and outs in detail. "So that's it. Then go and clean the armor. I don't like the smell of blood." After hearing this, Pepper understood and spoke. "I don't really like the smell of blood, so I've asked Jarvis number 2 to clean it." Tony had also taken off his steel armor and walked up from the underground laboratory wearing house clothes and spoke. After joining the void, his 5 senses became more sensitive, so he could smell even the very faint smell of blood. Not to mention the smell of blood directly attached to his body, which is even stronger. Tony's mysophobia can't be said to be very serious, but he still has some mysophobia, and naturally he can't stand the blood on the armor. While Tony was chatting with Pepper, "Mr. Tony, there is a situation with S.H.I.E.L.D. They suspect they found Captain America." Jarvis suddenly spoke. "The messages delivered in S.H.I.E.L.D., as long as they are monitored or delivered on mobile phones, are always under Jarvis's monitoring. S.H.I.E.L.D. relayed the information about the discovery of Captain America. Although not many people passed it on, the level of confidentiality was not high, so Jarvis intercepted it easily." "Captain America, isn't that guy's human statue in the museum?" When Tony heard the name Captain America, he was stunned for a moment and said. To be precise, S.H.I.E.L.D. discovered Captain America, who was frozen in ice, and is now transporting him back to New York. Generally speaking, ordinary people will definitely die if they are frozen. However, Captain America is a superhuman injected with super serum and did not die. Jarvis heard this and spoke. "You mean, old people who have been dead for decades in history are still alive?" Tony said thoughtfully after hearing Jarvis's words. "Yes." Jarvis heard this and gave an affirmative reply. "That kind of old thing is still alive. It's really a wonder in the world." Tony was a little surprised to hear that the old man from his father's era did not die but survived time through the ice and lived to the modern age. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.